Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iterade, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Hey, Miguel Iterade back here on the Lights Out Podcast. That's the MMA detective, Mike Davis, as usual. And we got a special podcast here for you, deep dive territory where we thrive, we love it. And we're going to bring Chris Lytle in as usual, but not as usual. Mike, what's going on? What do we got for Chris?
Okay, so first and foremost, JEHU Media, JEHU Media helped us with this. If you're watching this on YouTube, all the fight footage that is layered over the conversations, it was courtesy of himself. He really, really pushed hard. If you guys like more videos like this, we absolutely have the capability of doing it, but we need help. Honestly, it's like we're kind of doing this. Miguel, myself, we got a little bit of help, but we need as much help as we can get if you want more videos like this. What we're going to do is 50 Fight Club member, Chris Lytle. Miguel, that's a term you coined and that we're running with. And we decided for our 50th episode that it would be best to have, maybe just take a look at Chris's career. He's a 50 Fight Club member, and we've never concentrated on the Pancrase organization. So let's start there. Maybe for the 100th episode, we'll take care of his, WEC and UFC career. But right now, there's not a lot of footage that exists for Pancrase, which we obviously have. And I think it worked out great. I thought the interview going to go well.
Yeah, he's our guy. It's his podcast. And but I do think that the Pancrase years are kind of something that people superficially know. Oh, he fought Jason DeLucia, or, oh, this, that, or that. But to get deep dive territory with him, we're in new territory here. And I want to thank our buddy Jonah Williams, too, for joining us, the third head of the interview as we grill Chris Lytle here. Jonah's been with us since the very beginning. He pinch hits for us whenever we need. He was actually the cameraman for the recent Shonie Carter interview. So a jack of all trades, and he's going to show his worth here with us when we bring Chris Lytle in. You ready, Mike?
Let's do it, brother.
Let's go. Chris Lytle, Lights Out Podcast number 50, the Pancrase years.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Lights Out Podcast. We got a super special episode today. A lot of the guests we have on, they say they come on for one reason, because they couldn't possibly say no to Chris Lights Out Lytle, an absolute pioneer in the sport. The sport is a super fast-growing sport, but he was one of those guys the sport had to catch up to. He had everything. We were talking about that a little bit today. He had so much that some of these promoters and promotions had to actually hold him back a little bit. We're going to discuss that out. Some rules may or may not have been played with, but man, this guy, he brings us all here. Very special episode 50. We're going to do a deep dive with the man himself, Chris Lytle. So how you guys doing today?
Thanks. Thank you very much, Jonah. I think Chris is the reason we're here in this podcast from day one, but now for the 50th podcast, he's like double, like now he's like the focus, and we're going to interview him. So thank you very much, Chris, for everything you've done for us. And I can't think of a better guest. It was actually the MMA detective's idea, and 50 Fight Club podcast number 50. Chris
Gotta do
Lytle,
it.
the deep dive with Chris Lytle, the Pancrase years, Mike, the early 90s.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So what happens is it's a lot easier when we focus on the UFC years. But then when you concentrate like on pre-UFC one, a lot of crazy stories. It kind of doubles the time of research. But then when you go to Pancrase, Chris, man, first off, Miguel 2 days ago tells me, oh, yeah, well, we're doing Chris on this date at noon. Usually we tape at night. I went on like a 25-hour binge just on Pancrase. My old lady's about to leave me because of this. So I'm just, putting it out there. Thank you, Miguel. 50 fights. 50 Fight Club member, Chris Lytle, 50th episode. And
Thank you, Mike. And first of all, she's going to leave you for other reasons. You can blame it on this, but this is just the straw that's breaking the camel's back. But go ahead.
Chris, sometimes you got to keep things behind the curtain. Those are obvious. What you just said is obvious. Yeah, the thing about your Pancrase years is that on your record, it appears that your second actual fight is with Pancrase, but I know through our relationship, that's not the case. How many fights do you have that are pre-February 13th, 1999, Neutral Grounds 10? How many predate that Bo Hershberger fight?
I think I was about 8 or 9-0 at the time. I remember when I went to Japan, I was like 10-0. Is what I thought. I think my record would have been announced at. So you got to understand, in the mid 1998 when I started fighting, they didn't really have any records. I know the internet was there, but I mean, you look on it and stuff, and they even announced some of these. Oh, this, the underground. They talk about some of these fights, and they'd announce. But I mean, if they went back, and if there was no like sanctioning body, they're out of there. They didn't put them in there. So I remember my second fight. You talked about the one, it was in Muncie. I think my second fight was in Muncie. Actually, it was a tournament for Chaz Bowling, and we talk about learning early in your career getting ripped off by a promoter. That happens, so I never fought for him again.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, take us back to like those fights before the record shows, because there were a lot of promoters in Indiana. Chaz Bowling being one of them. Chad Wagner. There was us down in Evansville. There were other people. I don't know if Keith Palmer had promoted yet, but you actually had some good promoters around you too. And so where was this actual first fight of Chris Lytle's?
First fight was in Richmond, Indiana. I think it might have been Don Thomas or somebody. I can't remember. He was out there was I've been training for a few months and just wanting to fight, you know what I mean? Wanting to fight. And then finally, Aaron Sullivan, a guy I was training with, was like, I got you guys a fight. Me and my buddy Eric was like, where at? It's going to be in Richmond. Man, you go this place. It was like in the basement of some, I don't know, man. It looked like something from Fight Club. It was dark and there was like water dripping here and there. They had to hold the cage together. It was so bad. There might have been chickens running around. I don't know. It was something like that. It was bad.
Who reffed? Do you remember what was going on there?
I don't even know if they had refs. I can't remember, but that one was it was like, I fought there actually twice, but that was one. It was just want to get my feet wet, go in there and went against a pretty tough guy. There was some guys there that were rotten, but I could tell this guy, I think he even wore a gi, but I mean, you could tell he trained some, but I was just, better athlete, better wrestler, and I ended up submitting the guy. So, but it was the second one that, I remember after that, I'm up training with a guy named Eddie Moore and some of those guys. I don't know if you remember the name. He was a kind of big police officer, fought something. And straight up there, and that Chaz Bowling came in, like, hey, I'm putting this tournament on up in Muncie. If you want, the winner of the tournament gets $250. I'm like, $250 all at once? Is this over a payment? How are you going to pay somebody $250? Whatever. This is in '98, so you got to understand there wasn't much money. So I was like, man, I'm going to fight and get paid $250. Jesus. So I show up there, and for some reason, only 3 people. It was an 8-man tournament. Only 3 people were there in my weight class. So I fought the first one, and the first guy I fought was the same guy I fought in Richmond, Indiana. So my first 2 fights were the same damn guy. You know what I mean? So I beat him, and then the other guy in the tournament was like, "Yeah, I don't want no part of this." So he left. So
you won by default.
Yeah, so I go in to get in the ring at the end. I'm looking at the other guy. I'm like, this dude's huge, and I tried to get in the 185-pound category to fight him on accident. I didn't know. They just told me to go to the cage, and I go in there, and he's looking at me like, you're not the same right guy I was supposed to fight. And then I found out he fought somebody else, and like, my guy quit. So I'm like, all right, I win by default. And that's when, we went to the bar to get paid, and Chaz, like, I remember he counts out like 5 $20 bills, like, there you go. I'm like, whoa, hey, hold on. You said $250 for the winner. He's like, Chris, you only had to fight once. I'm like, that's not my fault. I won the tournament. The other guy backed out, and you didn't fill the tournament. You said $250 to the winner. He's like, Chris, I fought over 100 times. I never got any money. I'm going to lose money. I was like, dude, the place is packed. I was like, we argued for about 5 minutes. I'm like, you know what? Piss off. Never fight for you again. Give me the money. And I never fought for him again. And it's always, you know, I knew how his promoters were then. I was like, man, you could have, looking back, I'm like, you could have, if you would have taken care of me, I probably would have fought for you for years. You know what I mean? But you ripped me off for $150 and hopefully it cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you make up the $250 mark. He made that up. That was, you know, what he promised.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, I won the tournament. You know, what do you mean? I only fought once. Yeah, but that was a tournament. You know, I'm sorry the other guy backed out, and I'm sorry that nobody would. You know, I don't know. It's not my fault.
I'm going to take a wild guess and guess that Chaz didn't mail you, like, you know, even a 2-page contract or anything with a little bit of details like a week before or anything like that. Nothing, no paperwork.
Paperwork, man. There was no such thing. You showed up that night, and whoever was there was there. You know, I mean, there was no. Yeah.
Well, you know,
the contract helps with little details like that. Just, you know, that would come later.
Back then, though, Chris, I think we can agree everything was based on reputation. Like your credit score, you know, you got 750, 800 credit score. It kind of applied the same way in the mixed martial art community because it was so small. Your reputation, people's reputations, they spread. They went everywhere. And people weren't afraid to kind of let other people know their experiences like you just had described.
The problem was there, like you said, there was a lot of reputable people in Indy, or in Indiana, so I would say. So he was the guy who was putting on fights, and a lot of people fought for him because they just didn't know any better, you know. And you know, if he could make money off you, he might take care of you, but he didn't know who I was. Nobody back then. It's my second fight, so he didn't think he had to. And
were you a big ticket seller?
Not up in Muncie, Indiana back then. You know what I mean? I had some people come, but I mean, you know, I was 98. You know, I was brand new in the sport, and you know, I wasn't out there at that point. I'd been training, you know, less than 6 months. I'm out there trying to everybody come watch me. I didn't know how good I was, if I was going to be good or not. When you go there, you get your ass beat. That'd have been different. You know what I mean? And so I didn't know if I was very good or not. I mean, I thought I was good, but it was just, I wasn't in the mode to just go sell a bunch of tickets right then.
So at this time, were you training with integrated fighting, or was this something that predated that?
This predated that. I was training with Aaron Sullivan, mainly a guy named Eric Geddick, and that's when Jason Geisey would come to the gym every now and again. You know, so that's when I was, and you know, it wasn't until right around this time when I start fighting when people start training together a little bit more, and then everybody kind of decided, hey man, we can make a go at this and actually make a gym. And then integrated was developed. It probably wasn't developed to probably at least 1999.
That's wild. That's wild. All right. Well, here, your first fight on record is Neutral Grounds 10, the California promotion that was, you mentioned Muncie, Indiana, operated out of Muncie, where you fought Bo Hershberger.
Yeah.
That day, I mean, obviously, we're fast forward, probably like your 9th fight. When you pulled up to the venue, did you understand that how big mixed martial arts would become a part of your life and what an integral part? Like, were you just sold on this is what I'm going to be?
Not at all, man. Not at all. It was just something to do, something that was fun for me and something I was doing well at and I was good at. And so, you know, you have a competitive nature. I was a wrestler and I played all kinds of sports, and then that's just over. There's nothing to do. But that, like, if you're a like mentally tough, hard-nosed like wrestler and that's over, you kind of want to do that at some point. You know, I mean, I was doing it for peanuts back then, just for fun, and I enjoyed it. But I remember how that fight came about, because if you look Bo Hershberger up, he was a lot bigger than me. He was probably 200 pounds. I'm guessing. I don't know. And I remember, you know, Jason Geisey at the time was, you know, he was fighting over in Japan. That's when I saw he was over in Japan, I was like, man, are you kidding me? I want to go over there and fight. And he was, you know, kind of the leader of our group. And so he was just it. And if he told you to do something, you kind of did it. And I remember he called me up once. He's like, hey, man, I got a fight for you. I'm like, all right, who is he? He's like, this guy named Bo Hershberger. He's like, he beat Oleg Taro off in Abu Dhabi. But that's all right. He's like, Oleg was doing cocaine on some shit, on some yacht for 2 days beforehand, so he's not that great. That was his excuse. I was like, all right. So
allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. It's all alleged. So I was like, all right. So I show up to the venue. I remember it was in Much, and like I had to work the day before, so I'm sleeping, and I get there, rode in the back of Jason's van, and I get there. I'm like, all right, and remember I see this bull Hershberger. I'm like, Jesus, man. I mean, I was probably 173. You know, I was still light back then, and this dude had to be 200 pounds. I'm like, there was no way. I didn't step on a scale. I didn't do anything, man. I was just, you went there to fight, and I remember one of the guys who used to train with Lane Andrews. You remember that guy named Lane Andrews?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Remember, he fought before me, another guy who was like with Bo Hershberger's crew, like the people from California. And he just got pieced up, man. I remember his head, he came in after the fight, and he had all these like cage marks on his head, you know, from his head being smushed in the cage, and all these lines. I was thinking, Jesus, I watched the fight, and he just got pieced together the whole time. So I knew they were bringing some tough guys. They weren't coming to Indiana to lose.
Wow. Yeah, I remember Lane actually, I think Lane did an IVC, didn't he?
Yeah, he was a good fighter, but I mean, he was a tough fighter.
I know, I was with him at one of the IVCs, so that's, I know who you're talking about. So, and he had some skills. So, yeah, Neutral Grounds was a serious show for back then. I remember sitting around waiting, like, I remember when Joe Pardo got into the UFC, and waiting around to get his Neutral Ground tapes because he had fought on that show, and obviously the Gracie fights and stuff, but just waiting to get tapes from Neutral Grounds and stuff, like, you know, back in the old tape trading days. So I had not realized that they had ventured to Indiana to do a show, though. That's news.
I don't know where that came from or anything, but they came. I remember it was just it was like there's a boxing ring, and they put up 4 cage walls. You know what I mean? So it was a square.
Kind of like what Monty Cox was doing back in the day.
Yeah. I mean,
cages didn't exist. Like the whole prehab structure where they all kind of clip in. Those cages didn't really come about to about 2003, 2004. So this is something that's got to be kind of like Jimmy rigged beforehand. It's probably a giant pain in the butt to do and take down and put up again. Like it wasn't, those types of situations weren't real user friendly. On top of that, let's talk about how the fight went. You knocked him out in the first round. Was that a surprise to you?
First, that's not correct. First of all, there was no first, second, third round. It was one round, like one 15-minute round.
So I'm right. You knocked him out in the first round.
And that's incorrect. I didn't knock him out. So I go out there, and I remember he was so much bigger than me. I was thinking, geez, what am I going to do against this guy? And he came at me. I knew he was primarily a grappler. So the first thing I did, I threw a real hard kick, boom, right in the stomach, and knocked him back. And I think he kind of looked at me, kind of funny. He wasn't expecting that. And he came at me, and I hit him with the big right hand and took him down. And he kind of pulled guard. And so I remember this. I pushed him. I was over in his corner. And I could hear his guys in the corner. You know, they were telling him, Bo, do this, Bo. Oh, he hits like a bitch, Bo. And I remember it was Wild West back then. So the gloves that Jason gave me to wear were like, you know, those knee pads, those like white knee pads that were just like had like a cushion in them, and it was those were like those were what I was wearing on my hands. Like there was nothing to them. But I don't know where he got his gloves either. So there was nothing in them. So they're taped up, and I'm in his guard, and I'm just bringing it down. Pads? It wasn't really knee pads. It was hand. They were like gloves, but there was very little to them. They were just like a pad, right? Like it was.
Were they the Ohana ones?
I don't remember what they were, but they were nothing. It was very.
These may have been the God Seat specials.
Okay.
And they were whatever. So
sorry, and the promoter provided you these gloves. These aren't the ones.
No, they said bring BYOG. You know, bring your own gloves.
BYOG.
You let me bring my own shit. That's what I'm bringing. And so I remember I'm hitting him. I'm doing like military style, like body head, bam, bam. And I remember his corner's like he hits like a bitch, Bo. He hits like, and then you know, after about 5 minutes, you know, they're going, Bo, you need to get up, man. Bo, you need to get up. Bo, you gotta pull. You gotta do something. You gotta try and sweep him. And I'm beating the brakes off him. You know, these little no gloves. Bam! And every time I hit him, his head's going back. I do that for about 11 minutes straight and just beat the piss out of him, and finally get him in just like that forearm in your throat crush, and he just it wasn't even a good submission, but I beat him up for about 11 minutes, and he's like, I'm out. I got nothing left.
So it was a choke.
It was a choke. Yeah, it was a choke.
Because online, everybody's listing it as a KO round one.
Well, because
no
I
video.
hit him a lot, and I was hitting him a lot, but really, it might have been the punches that added up, but really, I just, I put my forearm in his throat and pushed down, like, got right on his forearm. I choked him till he quit, but it was more the punches that led to that.
Okay. So 1 month later, I mean, that's February 13th, 1999. On March 18th, 1999, you figured out how to make that Japan connection, and you made your Pancrase debut against Osami Shibuya. Wait, Miguel, stop, Miguel. Shibuya.
No.
Shibuya. You're never gonna get that right. You wouldn't.
No, you know what, dude, Miguel. Just correct me from here on out. Maybe I just kind of point to you and you say the name because I'm never going to hear the end of this.
Shibuya is easy. There's actually a neighborhood in Japan, in Tokyo, called Shibuya too. So
yeah,
that's an easy one. But right before this, Chris, I think that I've heard a story. I want you to tell it where this was actually supposed to be Brett Alzawi's shot, an early guy or something like that. And talk about that connection, but clean it up for me.
Yeah. So. Jason Gasson called me and said, "Hey man, come over. I need you to help me train. We got this guy. They're sending out Brett Alzawi. Phil's sending him down because to go to Japan, you had to go through Phil's sleeve. That was it. There was no other way." And so
Phyllis Lee, early MMA manager, used to do the women's pro wrestling circuit with like traveling circuses. Some would say she's a little rough around the edges. So go ahead, Chris.
If you ever watch UFC 4 with like Dan Severn, she's the old lady like standing on the side of the cage. That's
with
her.
A cane.
With a cane. So she, I knew who she was from Jason. Jason was going to Japan, so she was kind of a big deal to me. Like I wanted her to be my manager because like, man, she has all the connections. And so she calls Jason, like, I got this guy Brett Alzawi. He's supposed to come. He's supposed to fight. I think it was Yuki Kondo or so. I can't remember who he's supposed to fight. Somebody good.
Yikes.
And so Jason had me come to work out with this guy. And I'm just like mopping the floor with this guy. I'm submitting him here. And this guy gets all mad. He's like, what the hell's going on? He's like, you guys are pancrasing me. I'm not doing this. I'm out the fight. I'm not going. He said we were pancrasing him. I think he used it as a verb incorrectly. I think he knew what was going on. But he got a hold of Phil. He's like, I'm not going. He's like, I go to Indiana and this. He was from Michigan. He's like, I go to Indiana and this guy who outweighed by about 15 pounds. He just submitted me like 5 times. I'm out. So he said, I told Phyllis, I'll do it. I don't care who it is. It's Yuki Kondo. I don't care. I don't know who's that. So she said I would do it, and they got back with me, and they go, well, we're not going to let him do this one, but we'll keep him in mind. And then they had me come to the next one. I was like, cool.
So that's when you fought Osami Shibuya. So in this, like Pancrase has got kind of a revolving rule set. And in this one, it was gloves, but no shin pads, 1 15-minute round. He at the time is 19, 19, and 8, 19 wins, 19 losses, 8 draws. And technically speaking, like your record shows that this is, you're 1-0, even though you're 10-0, technically.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that was weird back then. Pancrase had no weight class. One thing I liked about it, they had the king of Pancrase, and that was open for anybody. I was like, it was still old school. They had very few people were doing like weight classes. Even in this, they were starting to do it in the States, but in Japan there wasn't. And I love that aspect of it. I was like, man, I want to be, the king of the hill. You know what I mean? So I wanted to go over there like that until I got over there. I remember Phyllis said, Chris, they want you to fight. She goes, how much do you weigh? Please tell me you weigh 190. I go, I weigh 191. She goes, okay. I got there. I weighed like 175, and you can see they were speaking Japanese, and they were not happy. They were like, God. They were not happy. I was like, I got sick and I couldn't eat. I was trying to make up excuses and stuff. They were not happy because I was a lot smaller than this guy. He was probably another 200-pound guy. He was a big, he had this big old head, looked like Bert or Ernie. Which one has a big head? He kind of looked like him.
So is this your first time flying to a fight and leaving the country?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dude, for sure. I'd left the country before, but never for fights. And hell, man, it was by far my first time flying. I mean, every other flight had been the Midwest. I'd been to like Chicago. I fought for Bob Shermer at one point. I'm sure you guys know him, Mike, from Chicago days. I just fought around the Midwest, not even anywhere regional, just local kind of. And then I get like I said, I got to 10-0. It feels to see me fight a couple of times, and I won that fight against Bo Hershberger. They're like, yeah, we'll send you over, and it happened.
That's cool. So with Shibuya, it was you could see there was a lot of experience on his side, but you never quit. Like I would say it was a draw. The fight ended in a draw. Was it because there was no judges, or
what it was Pancrase was trying to transition, because before it was just pure Pancrase, so the big gloves, no open-handed or closed fist strikes to the head, mainly submission based, and they were trying to get in the MMA realm. So this fight was 100% anything goes. You could heel hook, you could headbutt, you could knee to the head of the ground, you could kick, soccer kick guy, you could do any of that stuff. And so, which was more what I was used to anyway. So I was like, cool, this will be good for me. One of my favorite moves back then was kneeing a guy to the head on the ground and making him roll over, and I could choke him. So I did that, sometimes back in the Midwest. And so I figured it'll be just like this. And like I said, I love the idea of having no weight class. So I got there, like, this dude's not only really big, but he's really
skilled.
They trained. I mean, they really trained there. It was a real sport. And the reason
together, a lot of them lived together in a barrack, the Pancrase fighters.
The reason the records were not good was because all they did was fight each other. I mean, they had about 20 fighters, and they would fight each other all the time, and they'd bring in some outside guys from the States or from Europe or from Australia, and they get some wins there. But, I mean, you're fighting just cream of the crop every time. It was different. It was like a fight league, and nobody had a great, really record besides Yuki Kondo, really, maybe.
So if you watch the fight, I would say, Chris, about 70% of the bout, you're being out-positioned. But at the end, right as you guys get too close to the 15-minute mark, you're on top and you're starting to pull away. And you could see the difference in, like, cardio and shape. And at that time, a lot of guys didn't have just the knowledge or wherewithal to kind of get their cardio up, or understanding of when and when not to breathe. And to me, that was kind of like one of your attributes, your early attributes, that kind of separated you from everybody else. And it showed in that fight.
I think that was just from me, having years of wrestling experience and understanding when I had to waste or spend energy and when I didn't. And like I said, I remember at one point, early in the fight, I'm scrambling, I'm doing some things, and I end up on bottom end thinking, man, this guy, this is the first time I said, I'm not going to knock this guy out, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to submit him, and I remember just thinking, geez, you got to buckle down and really, you got to finish this fight, and you got to go all out. And I remember at one point, it was about 10 minutes into the fight, I stood up and got away, and I just was so tired, I fell into the ropes. And they're like, you okay? I was like, oh yeah. But I mean, it was just my legs were going, because I never went that long, that hard. I mean, this is a big, strong guy. There's a big difference. I was training maybe 2 to 3 days a week. We were coming and having fun and going. And they were training 6 days a week, twice a day, hard. They were superior in their conditioning, but I mean, it was just a different thing. So I remember when I thought, I don't know how I'm going to finish this fight and how hard this is going to be. And I remember after going 15 minutes straight with this guy, I mean, I was happy to get a draw. I'm not going to lie to you.
So at that time, when did you realize that your relationship with the Pancrase, the people that are running it, was really good? 3 weeks later, you're back again fighting on the very next event, Pancrase 73, Breakthrough 7 against Jason DeLucia.
No, not true. I
really?
thought what happened.
I'm going by your online record, by the way, I might add.
Okay. Right after that, they had me come back. Phyllis talked to him for him. She's like, he loved it. He wants to come back. And they had me come and stay for it was like 6 weeks. I fought before that, and this was really awkward because they had me stay in the Yokohama Dojo. ahead.
There's two events in between that. I apologize.
Yeah.
So you fought in Pancrase 70, and this is Pancrase 73. I apologize. Go ahead.
But in Pancrase like 72, I fought. They flew me in. They said, okay, you're going to stay at the gym in Yokohama. So I had two gyms, Yokohama and Tokyo. So Yokohama's out in the middle of nowhere. There's like rice fields around. It's just, there's nothing around, you know? So I went and stayed there. It was like really is hot. Anyway, I stayed there and I fight one of the guys from that gym. He was kind of a newer guy, but I submitted him, you know, I think.
Yeah, he was a big pro wrestler type that was like he had a brother that fought too, Daisuke Watanabe.
Yeah. So I fight him, and I do remember he like at one point he kneed me in the stomach early, and I was like, oh, and I couldn't breathe. I pulled guard. It's probably the only time you're ever gonna see me pull guard. I pulled guard. By the time I got better, I got back up, and I'm beating him on my stand up, and I ended up submitting him with a guillotine choke. And then what was really awkward was then I go back and I live in that gym for the next 6 weeks, and I had to train with the guy, you know, so it was like really awkward because, you know, afterwards I see this guy and he's crying, you know, he's like in tears in the back room. And I'm like, oh, you know, I didn't realize this was like, to me, this was fun. This was what I like to do. This was his job, you know what I mean? And so I go there, and that's when I really learned these guys like twice every day, you know, besides Sunday. You know, they'd show up in the morning. We either do some weightlifting, we'd go for like a 5-mile run, we'd do some kind of plyometric, we do something, you know what I mean? And then at night, they'd come in and they do a lot of sparring, just grappling forever. So that's when I really learned what it takes to be good at this sport. And that's when I changed my whole philosophy. I was like, Jesus, these guys, here's what I thought as soon as I went there. I said, how am I beating anybody here? You know, like, how did I ever beat somebody here? You know, because these guys are training way harder than I am. And that's when I said, I'm not going to get outworked by anybody. Now, I worked just as hard as anybody in my gym and but that was different. These guys are training hard every day. And so I took it like, when I left there, I was in some phenomenal shape. I mean, all I was doing was, you know, staying there, training. We'd eat this big, every day they'd make this food called chunko, this big bowl of, you know, just all these vegetables, a few meats, and all the fighters could eat it whenever they'd be there. You know, they didn't live there, but I lived there with some of the new guys. It's very strange, but you know, it really taught me how. I mean, I remember at one point going in there with some of those guys and going with like Minnow and them and Suzuki, and they'd be like, "All right, we're gonna do 10 rounds, you know, 5-minute rounds right now. Strange people all the time go." And I was like, "Dude, that's a long time." It was in the middle of the summer. It was so hot in there. I mean, they had no air conditioning, obviously, but I mean. That's where I really learned how to stay out of ankle locks and how to stay out of moves, because I mean we just went hard all the time with each other. It was tough.
Now
it sounds like Fighter, but they forgot to tape it.
What's that?
It kind of sounds like the Ultimate Fighter reality show, but they forgot to tape it.
They didn't want that tape. That was their like. I mean, I don't even know if you were supposed to talk about it. It's kind of private. You know what I mean? It was different.
Were there other Americans there, or were you the only?
No, I was the only American there. And to be honest with you, the guys who stayed at the gym, none of them spoke English. The TV was in Japanese. I remember like Ito would show up sometimes, like, "Oh, Ito, how you doing?" Because he could actually speak English. So I'd like it. Other times I'd ask people, and they just look at me and go, maybe. They'd always say, "What the hell is that?" Maybe. You know, so that was all I get. So I had no idea. I mean, it was a lonely time being there, man. I mean, I was lonely with people because I couldn't speak to anybody. No TV, no radio. It was before a cell phone, so it was just different, man. I remember if I wanted to call my girlfriend at the time, I have to get on a bike and ride for about a half an hour to the train station, and then I'd call, and it was weird.
Hey, so you mentioned Suzuki. Talk about, because Pancrase is definitely an old school place with like pecking orders, and Suzuki's one of the legends. Funaki's one of the legends. So talk about what impression they made on you, because you know I get the impression when they walk in the room, Ito and Shibuya and everybody's like, "Whoa," you know what I mean?
It really opened my eyes to the hierarchy of how things go there. You know, Suzuki was in charge of the Yokohama Dojo. You know what I mean? Funaki was in charge of Tokyo Dojo. So the P Lab there. So I was always around Suzuki mainly, you know what I mean? But yeah, they have a great deal of reverence for him. So he's one of the original founders, one of the original fighters for him, one of the big name guys. So he was teaching, he was instructing, and not me much because I couldn't speak much. So I mean, I just kind of do whatever they did. But they'd speak in Japanese, and somebody talk to me, grapple 5 minutes. Okay, I'd do whatever they said. But yeah, it was really. You could see the pecking order. Like whoever had been there, seniority means everything, and it kind of got on my nerves at one point. I remember they have what they call the young boys, and the young boys are the guys who are trying to become fighters. They're not really fighters yet. They right out of high school, like, okay, you're going to live here. So I was already a made fighter. I was a known fighter. So when they would have to make my food, do my laundry. I'd leave. I'd go in my little room. I'd come back and my sandals would be facing the right direction. They take care of me because they had to pay their homage to the elders, and I was considered one of those because I was already fighting for those guys. I remember at one point, the guy who was kind of like the most senior young boy, he was yelling at one of the other young boys for not doing the things right. I don't know what he was doing wrong, but he was speaking to him in Japanese, and he hit him in the head, and the other guy just was bowing. He's like, yeah. And I was like, dude, what's going on? I was like, dude, this is not right. I was getting pissed because I was thinking I got to stand up for this other guy. But then I noticed, I was like, that's how things are here, man. This is just different way of thinking. There's a hierarchy that I don't understand, but I was learning about it. And so this guy, the first young boy, he's in charge of all the other young boys. He's getting in trouble by Suzuki for these guys messing up. So it's his responsibility to get them in line, or he's going to get beat on. So, because I remember Suzuki is me. He was grappling the guy that's talking about the oldest young boy. He's choking the guy, and the guy's tapping out, and he's not really letting go. And finally, he let him go, and the guy's about unconscious, and he slapped him. And then he put him in another move. I was like, dude, he was beating the piss out of this kid. I was like, dude. But I didn't understand it. He was getting in trouble for not getting these other guys in line. So that guy's job was to get those guys in line. He was going to do it no matter what. That's just how things are. It's a totally different way of thinking that I wasn't ready for. But it was eye-opening. But like I said, Suzuki had everybody's respect because he was one of the original guys who did it. And people knew how good he was and how tough he was and how mean he was. And he was he was a badass. He was well ahead of his time.
So when we talk about early Pancrase, you're talking about people that live in barracks that got housing, food. It's kind of like early Black House days. The difference is that these Pancrase events are held in really small venues. Like some of the venues that I saw you fighting, Chris, looked like they seated 1,500 people, 1,600 people. And the amount of overhead needed in order to make this machine run, it seemed like you needed more people at the events. You needed a consistent weekly event in order to do it. Were you aware of how some of the money was kind of flowing in order to pay for all these expenses?
I knew they had sponsors. I knew they had backing. I know it was on, I can't remember the name, but it was on some TV there as well. So that helped. And the first time I fought, it was in a place, I think it's about 5,000 people. So some of the smaller ones, Corrigan Hall, whatever, yeah, they'd have maybe 1,500, but some of them had, and they were always on, was it Sky TV? It was some TV thing that the fights were on. So it was being broadcast to Japan.
I was actually wondering about that because it looked like some of these venues are pretty small, but they're so quiet. And a lot of times venues look small, but just the silence of the audience. Were they really small places, or did they just come across as small on video because of the sedate audience?
Like I said, some of them were. Mike was probably right, about 1,500. And then, like I said, I remember when the first ones I fought in, it was probably 5,000. You know what I mean? So I was like, man, it was the biggest place I'd ever fought in before. I remember when we were fighting Shibuya, at one point, I'm on bottom and headbutts were legal. So I remember I'm on bottom, I'm holding on, and he kind of peeled my head back and whack. And I remember he headbutted me. And I remember, when you're sitting here, I'm trying to hold, and all of a sudden, white flash. Everything goes white, and I kind of laid back. I pull him in tight, and I look over at the big screen. I can see me. There's a big screen, too, so I can see me, and I move around like, all right, I'm okay. I didn't know until I saw. I was like, oh, I'm okay. And then I started fighting. That was the first time I ever had that white flash. It was like, ugh, you know, all of a sudden everything goes white for a second. Like, what happened? What just happened? Like somebody just took a picture of you, you know, and it flashes in your face, and all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm all right. Let's go. Let's keep fighting. Yeah, but the big screen helped me out there. But like I said, that was because it was at a big venue with probably 5,000. But a lot of them weren't that big. They were smaller, but they were on Sky TV or something like. I can't remember what it was.
Like I can tell you, in terms of details, I don't know if the timing is right, but for example, Pancrase for a while ran with a sponsor from a store in Japan called Don Quixote. Don Quixote is like similar to Walmart, like you can go in and buy everything, but everybody in Japan knows it. And the owner of that is a very big fan that was probably the main sponsor of Pancrase for many years. I don't know if it goes to back then, but for example, that's how it ran. And I know that, you know, the owner of that liked his Pancrase. He liked his fighting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just for time's sake, I'm only in the third fight. So like, okay. I got like 20 more. So okay. I'm not saying, you know, we got to hit fast forward.
Okay.
But, you know, Chris, you want to do that 10-hour, you know, deep dive? I'm in too, myself. We got Jason DeLucia, your third fight in Japan. It's Pancrase 73, Breakthrough 7. You're listed online as 2-0-1, and Jason's record is 29-13 with a 2-1 record in the UFC.
Yeah, and I remember I was super excited about that fight because he was ranked 4th in Pancrase at the time for the king of Pancrase titles. He was ranked like 4th. I was like, man, a win here really helped jumpstart my career. And he was awkward. He was a weird dude, man. I mean, not only his actions, I'm not his personality, but just the way he moves and the way he does stuff, you know? And
he was doing like the robot in
was
the
like,
beginning.
He comes up there, I'm like, what do you do? It just took me a minute to figure out, but I was very disappointed. I felt like I did enough to win the fight. And I think I lost a majority decision or something. I don't remember. I don't think it was unanimous. I don't remember what it was, but I remember thinking, right after the fight, he came up and he was like, you really controlled the pace of the fight. But he would do, like, I didn't really understand their scoring system there until like afterwards. For example, I remember at one point I'm on top of him and he like grabs and tries to give me like in a gooseneck wrist lock, which is nothing. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I think stuff like that was giving him points. I think he was attempted submissions or something because he did a couple things like that. And at the end, I was like, okay, I've been on top and I've been doing most of the fight, and I lost a majority decision. I think it was a majority. I don't remember what it was, but it was very
1 round 10 minutes majority. 1 round 10 minutes majority decision. Yeah.
Okay, so Chris, this was like, all right, I've got everything like written down meticulously, and every time you'd go to Pancrase, they seem to throw different rule sets at you. So like on your first time there, you've got gloves, no shin pads. On this one, you've got no gloves, open hand with shin pads. So, you know, and let's talk about Jason DeLucia, like as a whole. We had Gary Meyer on in a past interview where he said, and if you look at Jason's record, let me just kind of come full circle here. 90%, he's a 55 club member with 90% of his fights taking place in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Now he speaks fluent Japanese. Gary Myers in his interview to us said that all he was doing was scouting the Americans, kind of giving them bad information, and then relaying what he knew to the Japanese fighters. He was almost kind of like a spy, and that's how Gary Myers described him. At this time, did you know that he was kind of in bed with the organization, particularly Yuki Kondo?
Absolutely. I mean, I knew when you saw him there, like he wore all the Pancrase stuff, had the shin pad. Like he was a member of the Pancrase team, you know, like I wasn't part of it. I was a fighter, but I was definitely on the outside. Like they had their guys, like the people who trained there in the what they call the P labs, you know, the Pancrase labs, either Yokohama or Tokyo. He was one of those guys. I wasn't one of those. The Americans they brought in were not one of those guys. He was on their team. You know what I mean? So he was 100% what he said. He spoke Japanese. He might have lived there for all I know, but he was one of their guys. We were.
I'm assuming he did. I'm assuming he lived there because of how many fights. I mean, he'd be going back and forth every 3 weeks if he didn't live there. He had to have lived there.
At least for part of the time.
Yeah. And when I was speaking about earlier, where it seemed like at times they were trying to hold you back, this is what I was referring to, where there are fights where it seemed like if you could have had your gloves and been able to strike, you could have really lifted your body up. But that particular fight, oh no, we're going to do open hand this time. Were they just trying to figure it out as they went, like everybody else, or were they?
No. They, at that point, like I said, their still main system was open-handed with those boots on. That was the main Pancrase style. If you want to be king of Pancrase, that's what it had to be. And so that's why when they moved to those rules, I was like, all right, cool. This will help get me up the ladder. It was different for me because I wasn't as used to that. But I was like, I'll make do, and I'm going to learn. It's a fight. But I didn't really understand how they. And even looking back, it was a while before I understood how they exactly scored things. I didn't really quite get that, and I learned that in that fight. I thought I won, and I didn't. So then you got, and part of it, I think, if you understand the little nuances like he did of maybe, I'm going to try and get this wrist lock. They love submission. So if I do that and he's hitting me, I'm winning. I didn't know that. I thought if I was hitting him, I'm winning. So I didn't get it, and I thought I won, but it helps. He was ranked 4th. He was well known. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
It's impossible to judge. It's literally impossible to judge those. And Chris, they beat your record up. Like they really did.
Oh my God.
And 3 weeks later, you fight at Pancrase 74, no gloves, open hand strikes, but with shin pads. So soccer kicks to the head and kicks to the face with shoes and shin pads on is completely allowed. So no closed fists to the face, but a kick to the head is.
Makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, Takafumi Ito, which was also another draw.
And that was one, I promised. I remember I fought there, and afterwards I said, I'm never coming back, because I felt like I dominated the fight. I bet
you did.
Oh, you watched it?
Oh, I watched it. I was mentally ill. I was
on top for probably, 6 of the 10 minutes? And
maybe more.
Maybe 7 or 8. And I'm like, I keep hitting him, and I'm doing. He did. I remember I was always so excited because they send you a magazine in the mail later on. It was like their fight magazine. It's on Japanese, no idea what it says. But they had the audacity that the pictures had me on top once, him on top once, and him doing this cartwheel thing. He tried to do a cartwheel, and it was flashy, but it didn't do anything. He did a cartwheel, didn't hit me or anything, and I'm like. The crowd liked it, but does that get you points for doing a cartwheel next to me? I was like, I didn't get it. So I thought I dominated that fight, and I'm like,
show
I'm not coming back. Huh?
He had show points with the cartwheel. Yeah. He landed good.
Yeah, and that's why I said I'm never coming back here. And then a couple months later, they go, "You coming back?" Yeah, I'll come back. At that point, you got to understand. When I fought here in America, people were like, you do what? It was a weird novelty, and you were part of it. You just did it because you like it. You thought you and your buddies were just kind of doing weird stuff. I like fighting in cages. But there in Japan, it was a real sport. I'd show up, and they'd have little baseball trading cards with me on it, and little kids that want to come up and take pictures, and you get to autograph their cards, and adults too. So it was a different feeling than you got here, and I liked it. I was like, I want to be there.
They also appear to have an overtime round in this bout.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to remember, I try not to look at the results. I just hit play. I watch everything. Yeah. And as soon as they went to the overtime round, in my head, I go, why is there overtime? This fight's over. And I knew you probably had issues at that point.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as if I won, then it was over. If he won, it was over. They go, it's a draw. Keep going. So I was like, all right, And I thought I won the overtime too. And then they go, nah, it's
you
a
did.
Draw. I was like, all right. That's when I was like, that's when I realized I don't really know what they're looking for. I don't know how to judge this, and I don't know. I figure I did everything to win that fight, and I didn't win. So
let's really come full circle on it, Chris. You're technically speaking on even their records, you're 2-1-1, and Takafumi Ito is 20-19-4. But if you look at his past competition, it's insane.
Dude.
He's got a very high level of competition. So there was a bit of experience difference between you two.
I saw him fight a guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy weighed 260 pounds. You know what I mean? And so there's open weight class, and he did very well against him. So I'm like, he was a bad boy, man. I mean, he was the only guy I remember being there who I was probably bigger than. You know, I was bigger than him, probably maybe about 5 pounds. But I mean, he's fighting these monsters all his career. So the dude was legit. He was very good. Man,
you seem concerned about his power too.
But, you know, it wasn't really power because it was, you couldn't punch close-fisted. I mean, it was open-handed, you know, so I was just like, you know, it wasn't that. It was, you know, here's another thing. When I stayed there for 6 weeks and trained, he was one of my main training partners. You know what I mean? So I'm fighting, going against guys I know very well, and I knew what he was good at, and I was just trying to defend what he did well.
So shortly after that, well, I shouldn't say shortly, you take a little bit of a break, and in November, your introduction to Miguel and Jeff Osborne is at Hook and Shoot against Luke Pediao.
Okay.
Do you remember that fight?
I do.
So Luke comes out in his high school wrestling singlet. How intimidated were you at that point?
I wasn't intimidated at all, but I knew Luke was strong as hell, man. I remember I seen him before. He was a powerful individual. I remember thinking, man, he came out with that wrestling thing. I was saying, this is hilarious, man. I know what to say. You know what I mean? It's just like, what are you going to do? And I remember from wrestlers I knew, I remember I was going to try and kick this guy really hard right away. So I went through a big kick right away. And I think he tried to get a takedown, pick me up, and I ended up choking. Was that right?
Yeah. Miguel, was that your first time seeing Chris fight live?
Yeah, I went through, we were joking, we mentioned Phyllis Lee, and we were joking off the air about this, but the bottom line is we were trying to upgrade, you know, the quality of the show. Here we've got a guy from Indiana who's been fighting in Japan as we've been covering. I thought it would mean a lot to get a guy like that had technique that it would add to the card. So we got him signed mid-level. I went through Phyllis, you know, we put him in the middle of the card. Luke was one of our guys, so he'd seen him fight probably on our show.
Well, Luke and Heath were both of your guys. His brother Heath Pediao.
Heath was more of a Jeff. Like after I'd left Hook and Shoot, like they worked together. I don't think I worked with Heath because he was a lot younger. But okay. Luke was a tough, you know, blue collar guy from from Illinois that liked to fight, but you know, I thought there would be a difference in level. And the thing is, the funny story here is this is 99 and Chris was born. So Chris is about 23 years old at this point, and his manager, Phyllis Leeds, told me, I got this 18-year-old. He's been fighting in Japan. And, you know, Chris proceeded to go the Vitor, at least via Phyllis, the Vitor Belfort route, where he was 18 for like 3 years there.
Well,
he was 18 with 15 fights.
Yeah. He's been fighting for 5 years. He's 18. Yeah. So a little side note, a little caveat to that story, you know, for those hardcore jiu-jitsu people, one of the top up-and-coming schools in the entire country is in Mount Vernon, Illinois, this real small suburb, and it's called Daisy Fresh, and it's one of its head instructors is Heath Pediao, which is Luke's brother. Yeah, they've done some incredible things on the jiu-jitsu circuit. So 2 weeks later, you fight November 21st, 1999. You fight in an 8-man tournament, which, Chris, we're going to go on a little deep dive with this with Monty Cox. Miguel and I kind of dabbled a little bit talking about historic events. This is up next. And there's 6 UFC veterans in this 185-pound tournament. And I think it was actually 180 pounds. And your first draw is future world champion Dave Monet.
Yeah. And I remember Phyllis set me up with this. I was like, cool, you know, it's like Matt Hughes, and I'm like, I'm pissed on that guy, whatever. And so I was like, all right, I'll go up there. And I was like, man, it was up like 13 hours away from where I live. I'm like, they weren't paying for travel. They weren't doing any of this stuff, no flights. I'm like, well, man, how am I going to get up there? She's like, I I got a guy for you here. His name's Dave Strasser. You go up and spend the night at his house, and you guys will drive up together. So I'm like, I've never met Dave Strasser before. So I drive up to his house. I'm like, hey, Chris Lytle's like, man, come on in, spend the night at his house. In the morning, we leave. We leave together, and we drive up to top of I can't remember if it's Minnesota or Wisconsin. I can't remember where it's at. I think it was in Minnesota, wasn't it?
Yeah, Hayward.
Yeah, Hayward, Wisconsin, actually.
Oh, Hayward, Wisconsin. Yeah.
But it's way up there. It was like 8 hours away from where he lives, which is in Kenosha. So it was forever up there. It was, and I remember we went up there, and I show up. I walk in to weigh myself, and like Matt Hughes and Dave Monet are just walking out of the weigh-in room. Like there's nobody else in there besides Monty. I'm like, they look pretty big. You know what I mean? So I get on the scale. I was probably 175. All right. And then I was like, did those guys make weight? He goes, yep. All right. And I left. So, I mean, I was still pretty new and green. I trusted what people said. Like, I didn't know they were part of Team Monty. I didn't know who was signed by who. I was just like, all right, whatever. I feel like he was big though.
They listed you as 10, 1, and 2 with international experience. Man, that tournament was fantastic. It's a legendary tournament. Yeah.
Brutal,
Laverne
man.
Clark was in it. Matt Hughes was in it. Yourself, obviously. It's got 6 UFC veterans, future UFC veterans that it's a sick tournament, man, for sure. And
I remember that. I remember the fight in Monet. He just felt so big and strong. I remember when I get on bottom, I just had trouble getting him off me. And I remember when I was on my feet, I cracked him good a couple of times. So I wanted to be on my feet, and I could tell he did not. And I remember I lose a decision there. I thought we hurt each other. We both hurt each other pretty good. And I remember after the fight, I'm pissed, and it's my first time really losing in the United States. And Monty Cox comes up to me and he's like, "Hey man, I don't think Dave's going to fight next round. He said he's probably out. So will you be willing to fight Laverne Clark?" I was like, hell yeah, I'll do it. And he's like, all right, I'll get back with you. And he came back later. He's like, he's going to do it. I'm like, all right. So I don't know what happened, but you could tell. I remember watching when Dave went out that next round. Laverne's first fight was like 15 seconds long. And so Dave comes out there and he's not moving well at all. It was a tough fight for him, and he ended up winning that one too. But then he quit and didn't go in the finals.
He couldn't. No, he won the fight but lost the war because he looked like a pumpkin head after Laverne Clark. Laverne Clark just threw dynamite every single time, and he didn't Laverne Clark doesn't telegraph his punches. Like he throws fire, and they're real hard to see coming. They're real hard to see coming. Yeah,
he's got big hands, too, big fists.
He's a mean guy. So
I think at that point he was like 4-1 in the UFC or 3-1 in the UFC. He was a legit fighter. Laverne Clark.
Oh, for sure. And what takes place is Dave Monet beats Laverne Clark. Dave pulls out. Laverne Clark goes on to fight Matt Hughes in the finals. Matt Hughes wins the tournament.
But Laverne beat him the first round. He took Matt down and had him down the whole first round. Everybody was shocked. Everybody was like, Matt was on the bottom the whole first round against Laverne. It was weird.
Absolutely. So that was 2 weeks after your fight for Hook and Shoot. 3 weeks after your Extreme Challenge 29, which, I mean, dude, you went to a decision with Dave Monet, future world champion. You were on bottom most of the time. Very difficult fight. You go back to Japan to fight at Pancrase 80. Ikuhisa Minowa? Minowa
was a bad boy. He fought a lot of high level.
Wait, Chris, never mind your fight. Miguel, did I pass?
You're okay on this one.
Okay. All right, Chris, go ahead.
We got more tests coming.
Yeah, everyone.
Now, Minowa fought everybody there, man. I felt bad for him in a way. He was one of the guys who was really good for Pancrase, and they just ended up throwing the woods. I think did he fight Rampage Jackson twice? I think he might have beat him once. I can't remember. He beat some good guys.
He fought Semi Schultz.
I saw that, man. It's so funny. He does like a somersault in and like takes him down. It was so weird. Then he shows him like 6'11". He was like 5'8". maybe 5'6".
6'11" and every bit of 270 pounds of purebred Dutch kickboxer.
Yeah, but Manoa, they love that shit because like they stuck him in with Hangman Choi too. They stuck him in and Bob Sapp. So
giants.
Like Semi Shield was like the third biggest guy he fought.
That's insane. It's insane.
I remember Minowa was one of those guys who was at the Yokohama gym. I trained with him a bunch, so I knew what he was gonna do. Like, it's so weird. Everybody I fought there, I felt like I trained with him at some point. So, but I knew what he was gonna bring to the table, and that was another one. It was 150-minute round with headbutts and all that stuff. And if you watch that fight, we headbutt the shit out of each other, man.
You got cracked hard.
But I thought I beat the brakes off him the entire fight. Really, I mean, he had a couple good headbutts in there, and he tried for some ankle locks. But besides that, I thought I dominated the fight, and it was a draw once again.
It was a draw.
But I mean, I thought at the end it was fun. If you watch the whole thing, like I need him in the head right at the end of the fight, and at the end he's walking back to the locker room and have like guys kind of carry him, and I'm walking by myself, no friends. I'm just kind of walking by myself. So no, that was a fun one. I remember that card. It was awesome because Nate Marquette was on the card. I was actually bigger than him back then. He was probably 170 pounds. I was probably 175, and then and I think Landon Andrews might have been. I can't remember. I think there's a lot of Americans on that card. We all kind of just cornered each other. You know, it was just you were fighting, but when somebody else was up, you'd go out there with them because it's like us against the world mentality. We stuck together, and it was a fun card, man. I remember afterwards. I always loved going out afterwards, man, because after you would fight, we'd say, "Okay, fights are over. We're going to Roppongi." And if you don't know what Roppongi is, that's the bar district. You know, that's where all the foreigners would go hang out and just get wild till about 6 a.m. You know, the subways had quit going at midnight, and you were out until the subways came back. You always come outside, you see the sunlight, you're like, I got to get back home. You know, I get the airport. I have to leave for my flight at 7:15. You know what I mean? So you get back, it'd be 7 o'clock. You'd take a shower, you grab your bags, and you'd head to the airport, man. It was awesome.
So, you know, just for people keeping score at home, this match was with gloves, no shin pads. So headbutts, you know, were allowed, and punches, you know, closed fist punches to the face. And Minowa had over 100 fights. At the time, he was 11-5. But if you look at his losses, like Miguel said, like it's a murderer's row. Like the mileage on that car is he had to flip his odometer a few times.
It was a solid card, as Chris mentioned. Lane Andrews fought Kunioku, and you know, I think Lane Andrews was your team partner. Genki Sudo fought Nate Marquardt.
Yes,
and Nate beat him most of the fight and got submitted with about a minute left. But I mean, I was impressed with both those guys because I'd seen Genki fight before. He's legit. And
Genki was a lot smaller than Nate as well.
No, not that time. They were pretty similar.
Really?
Genki was maybe Nate would have had 5 pounds. I was bigger than Nate back then. Nate was maybe 168. Genki is probably 162, 3.
Genki later, he made 155 quite easily.
Yeah, but I mean, there was no weight class, so why would he cut at this point? There, nobody was cutting.
That's true.
And you're in Yokohama. The main event was Suzuki, the legend, losing to Sane Kikuta. Kikuta's the only Japanese guy who ever won a title in Abu Dhabi, so he was like a legend over there.
Kikuta was a bad. I remember when he first came, he was a big like acquisition for him. He formed, and he was the one who brought in Genki Sudo. They were kind of training partners with that. I can't remember, was that Garaga? I can't remember the name of their team, but it was
okay.
But they were a little different offshoot. But man, he was on a different level on the ground as a lot of those guys. And to be honest with you, Suzuki at this point had been overcoming a lot of injuries, just wear and tear on his body. You could tell he'd been doing this for a long time. So the whole time that I was there, like Suzuki was past his prime and he was hurt, but he's still trying to fight.
So that bout ended in a draw. And Chris, when the opening exchange, you hit Minowa with a knee to the head. I'm not sure he ever recovered from that because it was
I agree.
it was a one-sided ass kicking. It really was.
Yeah,
So it's like
he shot in. I hit him with the knee, and he went down, and I jump on top, and it was. Yeah, I thought I beat him the whole time.
It seemed to me, just depending on your opponent and what would favor them, was whether they used shin pads with or without gloves. It was always kind of revolving. It really wasn't based on experience because you'd be, here one day and there the next. It just kind of seemed like the deck was kind of stacked against you.
Well, let me tell you, here's what it was with them. They liked me, but I was not one of their guys. You know what I mean? There's a big difference that people don't understand. If you find UFC, that's one thing. But when you were there, and what I mean by one of your guys, you live in their gym, you train with them, you have their uniform. Like I said, that Jason DeLucia was one of their guys. Minowa was definitely one of their guys. I only fought their guys. I never went there and fought another American.
Not yet.
Yeah, but I'm just saying at this point, I'm fighting their guys.
Yeah, and one of the things that you could say there that's a very different model. Those guys probably fought for free because they were on salary from Pancrase, so they had their monthly salary, their stuff taken care of. Yep. Hey, so you got to fight. It's like, hey, that's what the job calls for.
Yep.
Yeah, they really seem to be fighting at a pro wrestling schedule, but really fighting, which is like you say, these guys like to have so many fights and they have this high mileage. It's like, every Saturday it's fight night. Even if you're concussed 3 weeks in a row, it's still time to go work.
The Pancrase, they were so tightly connected to pro wrestling in a way. That was like pro wrestling background in a way. So they kind of combined the two. So they did have a very similar pro wrestling mentality in a way. Like all the pro wrestlers go against each other. All these fighters went against each other. So, if you're hurt, you just deal with it. And, that's what it is.
It certainly took the leverage of saying no away from the fighter when you're living, eating, and drinking all of their food and staying in their house.
I don't even know if they asked you who you're fighting. They kind of just told you this is who you're fighting.
Yeah. So what about the gloves, no gloves? When would you find out what rule set you were fighting under?
I don't remember. I just remember. It was before I got there. I knew, but I was just like, all right. As soon as tell me, as soon as they say you have a fight, what is it? Is it NHB or is it is it Pancrase? You're like, all right, cool. Let me know.
So a little over a month after that, January 23rd, 2000, you fight on Pancrase 81, and they always have these little weird like trans one.
Yeah,
I don't even know what that means. Keiichiro, wait, Miguel, stop. Keiichiro Yamamiya. Did I get that, Miguel?
Yamamiya, yeah.
Okay, my man.
Shonie,
you watching this, dude? So you fight him, and this is with gloves and shin pads.
Yeah, they were, like I said, they were.
Are you drawing a blank on this fight?
Yeah, no, I remember they were trying to transition exactly into what they were trying to more MMA based because they knew that's where the crowd was heading.
So
that's why you had the shin pads and the gloves.
So Yamamiya had wins over Yuki Kano, Chael Sonnen, and Nate Marquardt. And pretty good. He's 17-13-5. So we're talking about the beat up records, but he's got wins over those three studs. Obviously, Yuki Kano, world champion, Nate Marquardt and Chael Sonnen had very competitive fights in world title fights. And this guy who's almost got a 500 record has got wins over all three of them.
Also on this card was Shonie Carter, who you probably, I think Mike's getting to the fight where you fight him for Pancrase. Did you get to watch Shonie and Pancrase and see how that?
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that you'd be matched up with him on one of their other cards, or how'd that work out?
I thought probably, but I didn't really know. But I remember that fight against Yamamiya. I remember this is where I learned a lot, not in that fight, but I remember one of my probably third time being in Japan. I was still a young guy, and I'm trying to impress these guys. I wanted them to like me and think, oh, this guy's really good. So I go to the gym. I remember they're like, you want to just work out a little bit. I didn't have any cornermen or anything because Phil's took my pass. So I had no cornermen. So I was there. I didn't know that until later either. So no cornerman. It's like, but they're bringing me. No, you're taking my pass. So, okay. So I had no cornerman. So I go to the P Lab in Tokyo. And like, I'll work out with this guy. So, hey, mind if I roll with you? He's like, okay. But he didn't speak in English. We just nod. So I'm like, all right. So I start working out with this guy. And I'm still trying to impress all the guys in Japan. So they think I'm badass. They want me to come back. Because you didn't know back then if they were going to bring you back. So, you know, I'm going with Yamami and I'm putting him in, you know, all these different submission holds. And I'm like submitting him and he's tapping on him. Oh, I feel good about myself. And I go to this guillotine. I'm going for this other. I go for all my moves. I'm putting all my good moves on him. And I feel good about myself. I leave. I'm like, man, that guy was a Neo Blood champ and he beat some good guys. I'm pretty good. So when we fight, it didn't go like that anymore. This guy knew what I was going to do. The whole time we were grappling, he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to learn what I would do because he knew we were going to fight at some point. I didn't know we were going to fight at some point, but he outsmarted me there. And that's when I learned it later. I was like, you know what? That guy didn't even try against me. He tried to learn what I would do, and he learned it. So when I fought him, I can't remember if that was a majority decision or not, but it was
a decision.
I just couldn't get my offense going because everything I tried to do, he had an answer for it. He knew I was going to do it. So it was a tough fight.
So the caveat is to this fight is one of the things that if you don't learn it here, you're going to learn it soon afterwards. It's kind of a reoccurring theme is in Pancrase, the rule set, Chris was saying it's kind of a confusing rule set in regards to how you score points and how you get your hand raised at the end. But also like in, like, let's just say like soccer or basketball, and somebody is kind of like faking like they got hurt, like they're flapping is the term that is used. When you flap in those sports, 90% of the time the referee is going to kind of see through it and just go, keep playing. If you even come close to striking somebody with a low blow in Pancrase, it's an automatic point deduction. So anything that is like within a very close circumference of that groin area that's a strike, immediately they go, oh, even if it doesn't hurt, they raise their hand and they go, got me. I'm going to need about 15, 20 seconds if it's not that big of a deal, just for them to take that point away from you, which is certainly something that took place against Yamamiya, where you're just like, that was no big deal. What? It's no big deal. Yeah.
So like I said, I learned a lot from that fight. Things like you're talking about, right? They're like, okay, I was more, not honorable is the right word, but I was like, I want to fight. You know, I'm here to fight. These guys, it was an athletic contest about who could win, and that, by all means necessary. Their livelihoods on the line. You know what I mean? They want. I mean, I wanted to win really bad too, but I was just there to fight. And I think they had a lot of little tricks. You know, they were thinking these things too. It wasn't just like go out there and fight. Like I said, he hit me in the stomach, I'm like, my groin shot. You know what I mean, or whatever. They were going to try and figure out how to win at all costs.
So you were also cornered by Tito Ortiz and Shonie Carter. Why was Tito there? I didn't see anybody from Team Punishment on the card.
Okay, so Chuck Liddell was supposed to be there. He was supposed to. No, he was there. He's supposed to fight. I can't remember who he was supposed to fight, but he said like he hurt his ankle before he came, and he's like, I wasn't going to come. And they said, come out anyway. We'll see if you get a fight. He couldn't do it, so he just was there. But I remember that because I remember it was so awesome for me. You know, I talked about going there and rolling around. I got to roll with Tito Ortiz before that, just training. I remember thinking he was a huge deal at the time, and I really learned like he knew a lot more than I thought. I thought he was just some ground and pound guy, and I rolled him like this dude has submission after submission. He was good, you know. I didn't realize. I thought he was just a ground and pound guy. He was a wrestler who could elbow, but no, I learned he knew a lot, and it was a lot of fun. I remember afterward, this is so weird. Afterwards, like I lost that decision, I was mad, but we went out to Roppongi. Remember, it was Tito's 25th birthday. 25th birthday. And I was like, so we're drinking and we're partying. I remember I was like, Chuck, you know, hey man, let's buy you a drink. And Chuck's like, nah, I don't drink. I remember thinking, all right, whatever, dude, don't drink. And not till years later, I'm like, dude, you're hammered, doing coke all over hookers. I mean, what happened? I thought you didn't drink. Maybe he wouldn't drink with me. I don't know. Maybe he changed. I don't know. But it was like that was my thought of him. I think that guy don't drink. You know, whatever. But he went and hung out with us all night, and we had a blast.
So 3 weeks after that, you fight in Hook and Shoot again, March 17, 2000. I'm not sure where this event is at. I couldn't find a place. It's definitely not Evansville. Against
Tell City.
Where was it at?
Aaron Riley's hometown, Tell City, Indiana.
Yeah.
Tell City, Indiana.
At the like Legion Hall.
Yes, it's a real small venue against a very tough opponent in CJ Fernandez.
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember before that fight, you know, I got a tape and I watched him. I remember the dude has these Muay Thai shorts. I'm thinking, as a Muay Thai fighter, okay, cool, you know. And just watching, I knew he was strong though because he picked the dude up and slammed him. I was thinking, okay, you just Muay Thai guy. So I went out there for the fight. Tell City, Indiana. Never been there before. And I'm thinking I'm gonna box with this guy. And the first thing he did was like reach. He got these real long arms, so he reached in and grabbed my legs, picked me up over his head, and dumped me right on my shoulder and my head. Like boom. And I remember I was like, "What just happened?" And I knew my shoulder hurt, but I didn't really know. That's all I do. And then all of a sudden, this dude comes out and starts trying to hit me. So I'm blocking. I'm trying to defend myself, and I was like, "Okay." It took me a minute to get my bearings. Remember, I got back to my feet and I hit him with a good right hand, and it didn't really hurt him. I'm thinking, that's weird, because it kind of knocked him, but I thought it should have knocked him out. And we tie up, and he body locked me, and I fell on top of him, and he like wizarded me over. And I remember thinking, that's never happened before. I remember, is this guy just really strong?
He's a lot bigger than you.
I was like, but I remember thinking, what the hell? Why is he able to do? I don't care if you're bigger than me. You can't wizard me over. I mean, I don't care who. So I couldn't figure it out. And then, like the fight, I don't remember how long it wasn't rounds though. Still, we're still in like the 11, 12 minute. I can't remember what it was, but I remember about 10 minutes in, I ended up catching him with a triangle choke and submitting him. You know, and I remember trying to stand up afterwards and raise my hands up, and only my left hand would go up. My right wouldn't go all the way up. It was like, ugh. And then I get out of the ring. I remember the late great Tony Ross was like, "All right, you good job, man. You ready to go?" I go, "Where?" He's like, "Go to the hospital." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Look at your arm. Look at my shoulder. Look down my shoulders. That bone sticks out. My bone is sticking out real far, like grotesquely." And people are like, "Ugh." I remember thinking, man, I'm just gonna go to the paramedics, have them pop it back in. And they were just like, "Dude, it's not dislocated, it's separated," you know. And I was like, what does that mean? It means you got to go to the hospital. So it was Tell City, Indiana, about 3 hours away from Indy. I'm like, I'm not going to the hospital here. So I remember Tony gets me in the car. He's like, "Okay, he gives me 2 pills and says, take these. And I did. And he stopped by the liquor store, bought me a 6-pack of beer. He goes, "Here." About halfway back to Indy, I was like, I don't think I need to go to the hospital. I think it's going to be fine. They're like, "Dude, that's going to wear off. We're going to the hospital, man." So I went to the hospital. They're like, "Yeah, you separated, man." I was out for probably about 4 months. It was bad. That dude was strong as could be, really tough. Oh, I remember where I saw him fight Keith Wisniewski for 29 minutes or 31 minutes. I can't remember, up in Fort Wayne straight. I mean, those dudes battled. He beat Keith Wisniewski in like 30 minutes. It was a terrible fight. I knew he was tough.
Now, Chris, in your high school wrestling career, you were the Indiana State runner-up for wrestling at your weight class.
Correct. Yeah.
So the one thing that kind of the questions that I have is, you don't mind playing the nail in early situations in your fight. Oftentimes you don't really fight a takedown that hard for the type of wrestling pedigree that you have. And for him to come out with that big slam and you being on bottom, is that just a way to kind of let your opponent throw you around, or how do they get top position?
What happened with that one was, like, I honestly thought he was going to try and stand up more. You know, I didn't really anticipate 2 things: him trying to take me down and how long his arms were, just to really not even shoot in and be able to just reach down and pick me up like that. I was like, I have a pretty good takedown defense. People usually can't do that, you know? So when you're standing up, and I was ready for punches and strikes and kicks, and so when I'm up here like this, and he grabbed the legs like that, usually I could get back, but he was incredibly strong with his really long arms, and he just scooped me up real quick. Like I said, he impressed me with his strength, you know, and his ability to pick me up off my feet. But like, if we wrestle, I think I could do a very good job of stopping takedowns. But when you start adding kicks and punches in there, And unfortunately, my mentality is always offensive when it comes to kicking and punching. I want to hit you hard, and that takes away from my takedown defense. Those guys who are good at stopping takedowns, everything, I think that they don't tend to have as good of power or striking ability. Like, they're more defensive, and I always think, man, that they can't hit hard. Well, they could maybe if they put into it, but they're usually focused on wrestling defense. I wasn't. I was worried about my striking offense, not my wrestling defense, and so that's what happened there.
Okay, so little side note: 50 Fight Club member Adrian Serrano was the referee that day.
Was he?
Yeah.
Okay, I think
he was helping out. The main event also was this was a setup for Chris Lytle versus Aaron Riley that
which
we
we'll
later
get to.
do, because Riley almost got knocked out by Jeremy Bennett and came back to win a heroic fight where he knocked Bennett out in the main event, and Chris had his fight, which also had a heroic kind of come from behind feel to it. So this was a natural setup. Lucky we had 300 people there to really build the fight up, but
hey, and this was one of the things that made me know that Miguel was my guy, because every other person I fought for, if you get hurt, like, yeah, it sucks, and I remember Miguel was like, hey man, you go to the hospital, we got you, and he paid for the bill for me. So I never forgot that. I was like, dude, I can't believe, that was shocked me that he would do it, you know what I mean? Because nobody else would do that for me back then, man. They'd be like, hey, you're on your own, brother. So Miguel's like, we got you, Chris. I was like, man, I've always said, like, yep, these are my guys. Whatever they need, I'm in, so taking care of me in the right way is awesome.
I appreciate that. It was the kind of thing where it's like, there's Chris. Chris is actually leaning over like this, and like you could actually tap the bone on his shoulder. And I'm looking at like Jason Godsey, Tony Ross, and I'm like, I don't think I have much of a choice.
And that is kind of what makes Miguel is he's really known for taking care of guys, because he didn't see a choice. A lot of promoters would have been like, I don't see anything.
Yeah. I think that's what that one. Well, it was like that when you got in the ring. I saw.
It's a pre-existing injury.
All the way here like that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's funny. So you obviously take from March 17th to June 26th, you have a little bit of heal time in regards to letting your body recuperate.
I cannot believe I only took 3 months off from that, man. That's nuts, because I couldn't move it for the first month. I was in a sling trying to, I had a wedding the next day too. I remember with all my family there. My mom did not want me to fight at all. So I remember trying to pretend like I wasn't hurt at the wedding. I remember like I'm trying to like move my arm and I couldn't move it. I was trying to I was eating. I was putting my head down to the table to take bites. They're probably like, "What the hell's wrong with this guy? I mean, he's been hit too many times." No, I just couldn't move my arm. But people thought I was messed up.
He's eating like a pig. No, it's for the kids. It's for the kids, man.
It was bad. I had a big old cut on my eye. It was bad.
So you take a few months off, obviously, to heal up. In June 26, 2000, Pancrase 84, where you're fighting in gloves and shin pads against Daisuke Ishii. Miguel, if this was a math test, I'm acing this so far, brother. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Ishii. Yeah. So that was the one where they said, okay, we're coming up with weight classes. I said, cool, this is for me, man. I'm gonna do well in this tournament. And my manager, I show up there and I found out she put me in the wrong weight class. She put me in like the one, it was a weight class above me in kilos. It would have probably been 187 pounds. And I remember we were like, Jason was furious. He was like, Phyllis, what are you doing? Chris doesn't weigh that. He's a 170 pounder. She goes, he told me he weighed 191. I go, dude, that was 2 years ago. It's like, I just said that to get in. I was like, you don't know what I mean, this is the funniest, man. So I go to weigh in and they're talking and they go, you don't weigh enough. Well, what do you mean? They go,
did you say, who, me?
I said, what do you mean? No, you're allowed to weigh under. You just can't weigh over. I'm trying to explain the rules to them. Like, they're speaking in Japanese. No, you must weigh over. Like, my other one was like 77 kilos, the one I should have been in. Now I wasn't quite there. I was even under on that weight class, and they're like, you got to weigh more than that. I go, okay, what do I do? They go upstairs and start eating. So I go upstairs and I'm drinking all this stuff, and I'm eating the Chunko, and that's just drinks. I come back down, I'm still like 2 pounds under. I'm like, Jesus, I'm going to do this. So I remember Phyllis gives me like a big bag that she has full of like yen and all these like change. And I go and I put my shorts on, I put my cup on, and I put the change in the cup. So when it comes time to weigh in, I'm walking, it's like ching, ching. You can like hear the chains rattle as I walk up the scale. I get on the scale and I like barely make weight. And then they're talking, they make a rule after that, you can't wear your shorts and stuff. You have to just wear. So I made them make another rule, but I made weight.
Well,
Chris, to get up enough to make weight to get in.
The first
imagine weighing in with your jock strap and having the change behind your jock strap. I mean, you would have done it anyway. You know what I mean?
Whatever it takes. But I remember that fight too, because I'd seen Ishii fight a couple of times, and he was. I was like, okay, this guy's a left-handed guy, and so I worked on all these kicks. I was going to do these kicks on the front leg, kicks. I worked on it, and then. Little did I know, as I came out there, he'd been training with the boxing guys. So he comes out and he's right-handed. And I was like, it threw me off. Like that was the last time I ever came up with a game plan like that, because it threw me off. All I had were these different plans, and he changed from a southpaw to an orthodox boxer. Like it threw me off.
He was throwing fire, bro.
Oh, yeah.
He was throwing hard.
And he's probably 195 pounds at the time, because he probably gained a few pounds after the weigh-in. But I mean,
he seemed to control the majority of the fight, but then he started to kind of pull away. You know, the beginning of the fight, you were losing, and you were real concerned about being on the receiving, end of his punches. And then once you started to turn it around, you glanced at another groin shot, and you got a yellow card, and that's what took the fight from you. Like I think you could have won that fight. Was it
a majority, or was it unanimous?
It was a majority, because it was due to the fact that you got the yellow card.
So that's what I thought, because if I won the yellow card, I think I would win the fight, because a majority decision, I mean, one of the judges called it a draw, and the other two gave it to him. So if it hadn't been for that thing, I think I would have probably won. But yeah, that was when I was very frustrated, and because like I said, I couldn't quite catch a break there.
So Miguel, there's obviously you're more well versed in regards to the difference in cultures than we are. The Pancrase judges were like, if you look at them, all three are sitting next to each other, and they're like in the front row with like a light on top of them in the stands. It's almost as if they were conferencing. Okay, well, somebody's got to give them a draw because it was a good fight, and then we do this. there was not separate judging at these events. Miguel, would you agree with that?
Look, I think that their system, you got to take into account that, you know, it's a Japanese company, and that they want to see Japanese fighters do well, and their system. So the Japanese fighters are fighting under the same circumstances. Their judges are also sitting at the same table and stuff, and opponents and things. So it all looks very strange, and definitely it isn't what we're accustomed to. And I think there are probably less works in Pancrase than they get a reputation for, especially, you know, around this time that we're talking about. I don't think that happened at all.
I don't think there was any at this point.
Well, is it a work when the judges decide what takes place?
Once again,
if the promotion in some way is responsible for the decision, then it would be a work. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I don't think that's. I think that what you get is you get two very clearly philosophical different people, you know, and we're judging, you know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was what, you know, you get guys like Jason Lucian, you got all the Pancrase guys, they understood, and they were probably told what the judges are looking for, you know, and the little things that they would do to help get them points, quote unquote, or whatever, like these little nothing submissions they might try. I think submissions were heavily weighted in there. If you tried at a submission, even if it didn't get, I think you got more points than if you hit somebody. So it was just a fundamental philosophical difference between the Eastern culture and the Western. We were definitely more, whoever's doing the most damage, they're whoever's closest to submitting, I think. So I think they just viewed things different, and it was hard for us to adjust because nobody would explain it. They weren't going to try and explain that to me. Why would they explain that to me? They didn't want me to win. You know what I mean? So if you could have went there and beat them at their own game, I think they'd have been like, okay. So I don't necessarily blame the judges. I blame the fact that nobody would try and tell you how to win.
So at this point, Chris, your record online is 4 wins, 4 losses, 3 draws. Think about how nuts that is.
Not good. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
not happy with that. But I mean, like I said, in my eye, and that's not to say I'm not just 10-0 back in the States. I'm still having fights there, and they're not on my record. I remember I had an 8-man tournament at the Adamark Hotel in Indianapolis, and I fought. I beat all 3 of those guys within less than 5 minutes total. I was very happy. I won like $1,000 just for like a nothing fight, So these fights, just are not on my record either. And there's more than there's just a lot of little fights that I'm going to that aren't on my record from that. So I probably had another at least 15 or so fights that aren't on my record that they're not indicated. So I'm still fighting outside of Japan too. I'm still going and getting wins and anything
Chris,
local. I'm dominating.
You're fighting on a 3-week pace, though.
Yeah, a lot of times. But I mean,
like
I said,
in Japan.
But I remember 1 month. I think I had 5 fights with that 8-man.
What are these Pancrase fights paying? Roughly
$1,200 to $1,500.
Let me ask you: was it the kind of thing where, like, when you fought 3 weeks apart in Japan, did you take one trip and stay over there for the 3 weeks, or did you go back and forth?
But I did that once where I stayed for like the 6 weeks. I had a couple of fights in, but I mean, mainly I'd fly back home.
Okay.
A lot of travel. Yeah, I mean, because you have to be there for 5 days before it.
Did you ever tell them if you let me stay here, just pay me for the flight? Just give me what you're spending at American Airlines?
Yeah, man. It was but then it was weird because they would have to invite you to live in the gym, and I wasn't really interested in going down that road again because when I did that, like I said, it was weird, man. You were by yourself. You didn't have anybody to talk to. There was no cell phones. I couldn't call home. I couldn't do anything, man. It was just sit there and train. So I was like, screw it. I'd rather come back for 2 weeks and train and talk to my people and speak English.
Even the time frame? The time frame wouldn't screw you up because it's like you go there, it takes you days to adjust to their time frame, then you come back, it takes a few days to adjust back, and now you're screwing that like internal clock up.
It messed you up, man. It was tough. It was tough getting used to for a long time. But like I said, I definitely remember at one point I had that 8-man tournament at the Adamark Hotel in Indianapolis, and that was like my 5th fight in a month. So you mix in those 3-week times. I like one of those 2 weeks. I knew those were going to be easy tournaments, so I took it in there. And every now and again, I just throw another fight, and I felt like just to keep, man, just to keep fighting. I just wanted to fight every time possible. I didn't really understand peaking and stuff at that point. That really wasn't until I started doing my boxing career that I started having some issues with that. And at this point, I didn't even start boxing until 2002.
All right, so Chris, there's a difference between training for a fight and training to get better.
Yep.
At this point,
I didn't know that at that point. I wasn't peaking or anything. I would just train all the time, and there was no trying to. I didn't understand this, and nobody explained that to me. This is something I had to develop over the School of Hard Knocks and getting some losses because you were stupid. You know what I mean? So, but there was nobody. I wasn't in a boxing gym yet, and it was just basically me and Jason and these guys trying to develop a system and figure out all this on our own. Like nobody was telling us any of this stuff. We were just guys from Indiana who would go and beat the piss out of each other every day, and that was it. And you got tougher, or you got out. And we learned like, hey, this doesn't work well. Maybe you should do this. And we go, okay, that's a good idea. Hey, maybe you shouldn't keep trying. I mean, Jason was a smart guy, but like I said, his advice for me against a guy who beat Oleg was, well, Oleg was doing cocaine, so you're gonna be fine. All right.
Were the fights almost like a part of your training at this point? Because it.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, that's when I got all my real knowledge, because you learn when you're fighting, and you learn when you're training, but you have to be trained the right way. And like I wasn't peaking for the fight. I wasn't, setting up a camp for this fight. I would train. I remember being like 3 days before a fight and still going hard as hell. I mean, just going out there and training hard. It's like I gotta be ready for this fight. I gotta train hard. Like, you should have been resting, Chris. It's like I didn't know. It's just like I gotta. I don't want to lose that edge. Well, you're probably not going to, but you're probably gonna get cut open now because we just didn't know.
So the one time that I believe that Pancrase did you a favor is in the very next fight, July 23rd, 2000. Pancrase 86, and then it's trans 5. What that means, I have no idea. Yes, gloves and shin pads for this fight. You fight Taro Obata.
Was that the fight where I'm wearing these like real, like almost look like as a baked potato, like a shiny tap out shorts?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I remember the guy's name. Yeah. The guy he wasn't one of the main Japanese.
Wait, you won by arm triangle.
Yeah,
arm triangle. Yeah.
Yep. So I remember he wasn't one of the main Pancrase guys. He was another Japanese fighter, but he wasn't one of their main guys. So, yeah, I remember I went out there and we kind of got in the mix, and I got him like a standing head and arm choke, and I couldn't get him down. He wouldn't go, so I jumped up and I pushed off the turnbuckle and flew back and landed on the ground and submitted him.
So was this a fight that like came together in Japan? Did somebody pull off the card, or was this a preset fight prior to you even getting on the airplane?
I don't remember.
I asked that because he's 0-3-1, and you're 4-4-3 in terms of records. So for them to give you this, it's kind of like, do we owe him one?
I think that's probably what it was, because like I said, they liked me and they wanted me to come back a lot, but they weren't, like I said, I think it was more of a situation of me just not understanding how the scoring system and all that. I think they knew I was a good fighter, and they knew I did well, especially some of those fights they called draws. I think I beat up their guys. I'm like, dude, this guy's good. So I think they want to try and help develop me a little bit. But I mean, it would have been better if they just told me this is how you win here.
Yeah, on that card, I apologize. I've got my phone. This is why I hate Apple. I've got my phone do not disturb, and all I'm doing is I'm taking phone calls and having to put them in a voicemail. So I apologize.
Okay.
Your late great training partner, as Miguel had said, Tony Ross, that night won a 4-man tournament.
I think he got second, didn't he?
It says I thought he won.
He won the first fight, but I thought he fought Minowa next and got his arm ripped off.
Man, I'm going from like 3 different online records, and I've already been proven twice wrong on stuff that I know I wrote down. So
he fought with me that night. I remember he won his first fight. But yeah, that was great getting to actually, like when we talk with Chael Sonnen, like when you make it to the top, it's good to throw that ladder down and let people come out behind you. We try to get as many people over there as we can, and Tony was one of the guys that made it and loved it. So I was happy he got to make it over there.
That's super cool. Super cool. So Miguel, when you get a guy from Indianapolis and Chris Lytle, and you got a guy named Shonie Carter from Chicago, who both have a lot of upside. Shonie, I think right from this fight, had fought world champion Pat Miletich in one of the most incredible fights I have ever seen in my life on an extreme challenge. Usually you would think either try to find the biggest ticket seller, put it in their hometown, find their favorite, put it in their, put it where the closest to them. Instead, Pancrase 88 flies you guys all the way to Japan and puts you in a 4-man tournament. And your first draw is Shonie Carter.
Yeah, you would have thought, we live about 3 hours away. We could have met in Maryville or something and fought, and they could have videotaped it over. No, but we fought each other. So, I'd seen back then, you got to understand, Shonie was a big name. He well-deserved. The dude was fantastic. And I remember that fight going in. I knew how good his wrestling was, and he's good. He knocked Matt Sarah out the spinning back fist. So I'd done some homework. I knew if he set his feet a certain way, spinning back fist is coming. So I was prepared for that. One thing I wasn't prepared for, I don't know exactly what happened, but I remember just gassing out in that fight and getting tired. I remember I felt like, I don't remember exactly how it ended, but I remember it was close, and it went to overtime. I remember in the overtime, I got the takedown immediately. I got on top of him. I was like, all right, I got this. But then he got on top after about a minute and just finish the fight on top and won a decision. And so I don't remember much about how the fight went besides that. I remember being tired. I remember being really tired, and I think he threw me once. He's got really good Greco, very good upper body wrestling. He can throw people, very good hips.
And at this time, when we got to take into account that Shonie not only has a win over Dave Benet, but also a 20-minute draw against a future world champion. And he's always in phenomenal shape. Like his biggest asset is how hard he pushes himself in the gym.
Well, now, here's the thing. It's not, go ahead.
No, you go, Chris.
I was gonna say it's not even the fact Shonie. I don't know what his record was then, but I mean, with so many MMA,
15-3-5.
But that's not counting all the other fights he did. I mean, this dude. The thing about
50
him,
other fights. Yeah,
exactly. So the thing that was so good about him, even more than his cardio, was his ability to not get tired there because he was so experienced. Like I've seen him just be in fights where he had no business winning, but his experience carries him. He knows how to not get tired. He knows how to, when he is tired, how to suck it up and just do enough to win. And I definitely picked up on there. Like he was able to maintain that pace a lot more than I was. And like I said, I really remember, I thought at the end, I was like, okay, I win. Then when it went to overtime, it was a draw. And I remember right away, I got the takedown. And that's not like me trying to get the takedown, but I was just gassed. I remember I got a takedown. I was like, okay, just hold him here. And I think I tried to take his back. And he shelled up, and I tried it, and I fell off the top, and he got on top. And then I think I lost the decision after that.
Yeah. When I think of the two of you and Shonie Carter, I think of high fight IQ and good cardio, and it kind of it was one of those things where it could have went either way, based on you maybe could have edged him out and got him tired, or he could have got you tired and he managed to get you tired. Do you think they put you guys against each other so they didn't have to deal with you both against their Japanese fighters?
Let me point out an interesting factoid here is that at this point, Shonie Carter, Chris Lytle, two Americans meeting in Pancrase, both managed by the same person, Phyllis Lee.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I'm not real sure why they, I think, to be honest with you, I think they wanted the winner to come from the other side. They liked Nate Marquette quite a lot. And the other guy he was fighting, what was the guy's name? The guy he fought for, it was the guy who was ranked really high. And they liked him a lot. So I think they wanted us to kind of beat up on each other, and so they could have an easier path to victory over there.
And you guys definitely did that. You guys beat each other up.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough.
And Shonie later lost to Nate Marquardt in the finals. Nate was the eventual tournament champion.
Yeah.
How difficult was jet lag for you when you would fight in Japan?
A
lot of Americans complain about it.
I got used to it because what I figured out was as soon as you land, you have to go run right away. Like I had to break a sweat immediately because if I would show up there and I would just go to bed when I got there because you're tired and get on that, you're going to struggle for about 3 or 4 days. If I would get there and I'd force myself to stay awake and go jog and break a sweat and do whatever and get on their schedule and sleep when they should go to sleep, I was fine. It'd take me about 2 days to get over it. If not, it's going to take you 3 or 4 days. And I remember the first time I went there, I didn't realize that, and I'm grappling with people at the gym, and after about 2 minutes, I'm getting tired. I was like, "What happened? Where'd my cardio go?" The next day, I come back again. 2 minutes in, I'm tired. I was like, "I'm not going to be able to fight. What's happening?" And then I just had to learn how to go immediately, stay awake, fight so hard to stay awake because you're going to be tired. You got to run and sweat, and then get on their time system. And once I got on their time system, my body adjusted. It wasn't that bad.
Okay. At this point, you're I think you're 5-5-3, but just bonkers when you think about like everything that we just went through.
Yeah.
And you
got to recognize in my head I'm 25-3 because I've had about 15 other fights back in the state.
That's true.
State.
No, that's
you
true.
know, so,
Yeah. No, for sure. And the UFC gives you the call. UFC 28. Yeah. You fight Ben Earwood. How does that relationship start between yourself and the
Phyllis
UFC?
Phyllis called me. Phyllis goes, "We got to fight for you in UFC," because she knew that John Peretti. She's like, they're gonna give you a fight in the UFC. I was like, all right, cool. You know, I'm excited for this, but I'll be honest with you, like the UFC like I still loved it, and me and my buddies would go get together and we'd watch it, you know. But I remember a couple of times we'd try to get together. This was all the fight guys, Tony Ross, all these guys we get together, and we couldn't get it. Like, they're not carrying it. Like, what do you mean? We're all at this guy's house, and like the pay-per-view, you weren't allowed to get it anymore. This one is like down like 3 or 4 states. They were having problems legalizing it in places. So it was just kind of a weird time. So I remember I was going to be in the first fight in Atlantic City, and here's how different it was. It was a 2-round fight, and like they got me out there the day before the fight. Like it was a fight on a Saturday. They flew me out Friday, and the weigh-ins were Saturday morning. I remember I get there Saturday, Friday night. I go run a little bit, and Saturday morning I went to do the weigh-ins, like in a little room, no media. It was very small, and remember they pulled me aside. They go, "Chris, your doctor's here. You said I told you to go to ophthalmologist." And this was an ophthalmologist. I'm like, what's the difference? An H. I forgot one letter. What's the difference? Like, no, you can't fight. You got to go to get this eyes test done. It's like, all right, when? They go, right now. So I go like the day of my fight, I got to go get my eyes dilated.
With the ink.
And they look in and do all my stuff. So afterwards, I'm just like, you can't see well. And, but it was, I knew I was fighting the Militich guy, and he was really odd. He like stayed right by the ring the whole time, or right by the fence, and all he tried to do was hold me down. And that was another one of my themes. I think they probably saw the Monet fight, and they're like, "Are you guys? Am I breaking up here?"
No,
you're good.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Good. I think they probably watched the Monet fight, and the guy it was just did the bare minimum to try to hold me down, and I'll be honest, like when I was there, I wasn't really overly impressed with the UFC production, anything, man. I remember thinking when I was there, I like it better in Japan, how they treat and how everything goes. And I was like, I don't know. You got to understand too, at this time, I don't go ahead.
You weighed in at 167 for this fight, I might add.
Yeah. I was pretty light, man. I wasn't really. You got to understand one thing here. At this point, I mean, I'm loving it. I'm liking it, but I wasn't taking this. This wasn't a career path for me in any way. This was never. When I go to Japan and I'm making $1,200, and when I fought for the UFC, I fought for them. I got paid $500. So when you're making that kind of money at the biggest, that's right. So when I got that kind of money, I was like, you know what? No, I'm like, this was not a career path anymore. And I was like, if I'm making it here and this is all this was fun hobby for me at that point. This is 99 still. I've been doing about 1.5 years. Like, this is fun and I enjoy it, but I never thought of this as like my career. There was a few guys maybe who were making it all the time, but like, I never really looked like I was still trying to get on the fire department. Then I was like, yeah, this is just something I do for fun. But I mean, I wasn't in a real camp. I wasn't really doing things the right way. Like I said, I wasn't, I was still going from job to job, trying to do things where I could still train, but not necessarily, this wasn't going to be my life path.
And when you got the call from the UFC, were like, obviously now like the UFC is kind of this holy grail. Were you super excited about it, or was it just kind of like a lateral or just another fight?
Yeah, no, I was happy about it because that was the first thing I started watching. Oh my God, the UFC, and I was super happy. It was like a milestone. I was like, oh, I'm going to make it to the UFC. But after I fought there once, I was like, I'd rather go back and fight in Japan and get paid. I think at that point I was making like $1,800, which is considerably more than 500. And man, I remember just fighting for the UFC. Like, you go to other places, they give you per diem. UFC, they'd be like, here's a meal ticket you can eat at the where the servers at the Taj Mahal eat. So you go back there and there'll be like bus boys and like the cook staff would be there. It's like, it wasn't even, it was so weird. Like, this is all you got instead of per diem. They gave you an unlimited time you could go into this place and eat. I was like, it was just, it wasn't well ran. You weren't treated like an athlete. And I was like, yeah, I'd rather fight in Japan anymore. I didn't want to be fighting for those guys. Really.
I'll tell you what's funny about that, because I've done that deal at the Taj Mahal, and it's kind of appealing in some way because the UFC rolls in with a whole crew. And the bottom line is the casino has a 24-hour restaurant for their employees because they got people working all the time. They go take their breaks there. And it's a full buffet. It's tons of stuff. But these guys are watching their weight. Who cares about, it's like, oh, look, this is delicious, but it's for the whole crew. Everybody else benefits except the fighters.
Yeah, you can't have Salisbury steak and mashed potatoes. When you're yeah.
That's wild. Shortly after that, so we're looking at November 17th, 2000.
Couture Randleman.
Yeah.
Couture Randleman in the main event.
Yeah. So Chris gets pinned in the Miletich corner. Ben just blankets him, gets his hand raised. Ben never gets asked back into the UFC after that fight. And 2 weeks later, actually less than that, November 24th, 2000, Chris, you fight in the Bad Boy competition. Do you remember that?
Was that a
four-man tournament?
Was that in Kokomo?
I'm not sure. It doesn't list where it's at. My feelings are that it's a Gary Myers event, and the reason is because the first round you fight Beaver. That's the guy's actual listed name on your record. And in the second round, you fight Mike Haltom. But Mike Haltom, after losing to you, fights another 2 times that night, and they're not tournament fights. And he's from Gary Myers' camp. So I'm assuming Gary was trying to piece together a card and kept sending his buddy out there to kind of, complete, the 9-man schedule. Do you recall this?
I think that was in Muncie. And, that was the first guy. I thought Beaver's not his real. I remember what it was, but
I don't believe.
I think his nickname. No,
it's his real name.
His nickname was the Squirrel. He was terrible. I was like, dude, I fought in the UFC. Why am I fighting this guy? But it lasted about 30 seconds. I punched him and choked him, and it was it. And then the guy, the other guy I fought was a guy named Mike Holder or something.
Mike Haltom.
That guy was pretty tough, man. But that was one guy. I remember this is when knees to the head were still legal, because I remember. I got him on the ground, and I remember, I put the knee way back, boom, and kneed him in the head once, boom, kneed him in the head twice. I went to knee him the third time, and he rolled over to his stomach, which meant you could choke me now. I'm going to go out with honor. I'm not going to tap him to strike. So if he rolled over, I choked him, and he tapped out. It was like, there was honor in it. He didn't tap because I was beating him up. He tapped because he couldn't breathe. There's nothing wrong with that, Mike. Quit judging him for tapping to that. But I used to love it when that was a way you could tell when people would I love knees to the head, because people, you either got to move, you got to figure out what to do, or you find the way out. He found the way out.
Who was the promoter?
I can't remember if it was Gary Myers or these 2 guys named Jeremy and Jeremy something or other. I can't remember. There was 2 guys named Jeremy who would put on fights for a while in Indy or in Muncie right around that time. But I can't remember which one it was. I think it was those 2 Jeremy guys.
Okay, so you take a little bit of time off. When I say a little bit of time, about 3 months. And you fight in a Circle City Challenge against Nick Hyde after that. And Nick is 1-1. And after you beat him on that same event, oh no, you got a draw against Nick. Was there no judges on that?
Here's the funny thing. I feel bad for this, because really this hurt Nick in a way. This was an exhibition match. Here's what happened. I was supposed to fight somebody. Nick was supposed to fight. How it worked was we actually had a gym at this point. We had integrative fighting, and how we would pay for the rent was we put on a fight about every 2 months, and all the money, nobody get paid. All the money would go to gym fees. So I had a fight schedule with a guy, and he had a fight schedule. Neither one of our guys showed up. We were training partners, for God's sake. We were training partners. We're like, hey man, let's just get out there. And this was a straight kickboxing fight. And he was a great kickboxer. He's my kickboxing coach. We're like, let's just go out there and put on a good fight. We beat the shit out of each other, man. Jason's out there losing his mind, going nuts. Cause I mean, he kicked me in the lip and knocked me over on punch. He's got black eye. I mean, we put on the best fight of the night. We beat the shit out of each other. And afterwards they're like, it's an exhibition. So it's just going to be a draw. No matter, that shouldn't even be on my record. I don't get it. But Nick, I remember later on, Nick had trouble getting some fights because, like, you got to draw with Chris Lytle. I'm not fighting you, you know. So he had trouble getting some fights afterwards. But Nick was an absolute animal on his feet. So great competitor, and that was a fun fight just for fun. But it wasn't a real fight; it was an exhibition. But we sure went at it. It was all stand up too.
Yeah, there's like little things on people's records. Obviously, when we notice that, we always like to address it with the person. That was the one thing that stood out outside of fighting Beaver the time before. So March 30th, 2001, you fight in one of my favorite events of all time. We've talked about it, numerous times in the past on this podcast. Reality Shoot Fighting 3. The person you carpooled with up to that 8-man tournament, Extreme Challenge, you fight Dave Strasser.
Oh shit, that's right. Randy Greenman. Over in St. Louis, East St. Louis.
Yes, Belvedere.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, once again, I always liked Dave, and but they said, hey, this is who you're fighting. I was like, all right. So I believe once again another draw.
Yeah, another draw, and this okay. And I know we've talked about this guy before. If you guys would mind if I indulge one more time. Randy Greenman took over the territory from a guy named Brian. Was it Brian Mason? Miguel?
I'm not sure.
Come on. Steve Berger used to fight for him all the time. Brian Madison?
No, Brian Madden.
Brian Madden. I knew that was it.
Okay, yeah.
Brian Madden has a heart attack, and Randy Greenman takes over. And in essence, what takes place is Randy is dealing a lot of cocaine with the bikers, and he's washing. He's washing a lot of his alleged. No, it's confirmed. It's confirmed. He's washing a lot of his money through his shows, and he ends up in a bunch of different pieces all over Southern Illinois when
his
the original drug dealer comes back. Yeah, we talked about this with Steve Berger on his interview kind of in depth. But on that same card, you've got Manny Gambarian versus Sean Shirk. So like some of those fights in reality shoot fighting, oh my gosh, incredible.
A lot of good UFC veterans there. A lot of UFC veterans on those cards.
Pablo Escobar bought like hippos and giraffes and stuff. Randy Greenman put on real fights, at least, and he paid real money. The bottom line is he had made $500 for a UFC fight. You probably made maybe $2,000 for a Strasser fight. I don't know, but I'm guessing.
Yeah,
he overpaid. And you said Pablo Escobar bought like hippos and rhinos, stuff like that. This guy had a stripper girlfriend that had aftermarket boobs put on her, dude, that were ridiculous. Like the novelty section of a bookstore is where you find those DVDs. Yes.
You could have divided Randy Greenman in two and had two people that probably couldn't make the UFC's heavyweight class. They'd be over.
I agree. Yeah, he was over 500 pounds.
He's a big guy. Yeah, he was super
great
cool,
guy.
Man. I remember fighting that fight. Strasser's tough, man. I remember a couple of things. I remember I didn't like it because it was in a ring, and I've had problems with rings. And you go in the ring. And I remember at one point, like getting to the ground, and I was trying to do this guillotine, and we get caught up on the ropes. I'm trying to lift them and roll them over, and then when we get back, go to the middle, and then all of a sudden I got the guillotine. He dropped your hips. I'm like, I got no chance of rolling this guillotine out. You know what I mean? I know I have no chance at this now. So little things like that in the ring. But I remember he did a good job. He was on top a lot. I remember the weirdest thing about that was one point I'm pushing him into the ropes. I'm pushing him into the ropes, and he reached his heel around and pulled it back and like hit me with his heel right in my calf. And I remember thinking, the hell's that? That thing hurt me for like 2 weeks later. You know, it didn't really hurt me during the fight, but 2 weeks like that, they hurt me for a long time. But it was a tough fight. He was, I remember, Dave was a tough guy and he had a good strategy. He tried to hold me down quite a bit. And I don't remember much about that fight besides it was the draw.
I could give Dave a little more props. You know, he had been off for almost a year at that point, and he was coming back after having his neck fused after a motorcycle accident. So yeah, the fact that he was fighting is a testament to how tough he was.
Yeah, two future UFC veterans, you know, on that card. You know, fantastic bout.
In Belleville, Illinois, the one exit town.
Hey, don't let it fool you though. Belleville's rough, man.
Oh, it is. It's not Mayberry when I say one exit town. It's even to this day, like it's a rough place. And quick side note, the reason we know that stuff about them washing money and all that stuff is because it came out in trial for those who caught them up in pieces were held accountable.
Oh, they were good. Good. I did not know that.
Yeah, that's why I'm comfortable talking about it. Yeah, we talk about it. Go listen to the Steve Berger interview. It is an incredibly interesting part of MMA history within the Midwest. 2 weeks after that, Chris, you fight Jake Ambrose on Miguel Arate's favorite promoter's card, Chad Wagner. How does that fight come about?
We're looking like 2001 at this point, aren't we?
It's April 14, 2001.
Okay, this is funny because I remember I'd signed to do that. I remember how somebody asked me to do it. I was like, sure, I'll do it. And I remember, you know, I just got on the fire department and they were like, you're not allowed to do, you know, I'm not allowed to do any extracurricular activities. And I was like, all right, cool. So I made sure I just started training for the fire department. So it was on the weekend. So I remember not saying a word to anybody. Didn't want that to get out that I fought. There was very little. I didn't even tell people I was a fighter at this point. I mean, some people kind of knew, but so I remember, you know, I worked Friday, you know, at the fire department, you know, I was still in training. And then Saturday I went and fought. I won in the first round and didn't get hit at all. No black eyes. Like, cool. Went back, went to the firehouse. So, I mean, he seemed like a pretty tough dude. I think I choked him. I can't remember exactly what happened.
Jake Ambrose is tough, but you got him in less than 2 minutes. But yeah, he was a tough guy for the day.
Yeah, he was a tough guy. I'd seen him fight before, but I was like, man, I was really thinking I got to get out of this unscathed. I'm not going to go out there and throw a bunch of hands and do anything nonsense. I knew I was going to go out there, get him to the ground as soon as I can, choke him, and get my money and get out.
How was Chad Wagner as a promoter?
He was always fine to me, but I think, you know, he knew I was from Team Integrated. He had Jason Gotchi and he had all those guys. He wasn't going to rip us off. You know what I mean? So, but, you know,
I like Chad. You're a funny guy.
Yeah, I knew we were gonna be fine by him because he knew us and he wasn't going anywhere, so he was gonna be fine.
Now keep in mind too, this was the second cage. Sorry, Mike, but this is the second cage rage where Chad may have been trying to do a little bit of the right thing still, you know, because you know Tony Ross was on that card. He had some guys that fought Daryl Smith, Jay Massey, Miguel Torres was on that card, Midwest legend. And stuff. So still trying to do the right thing before, you know, later on he did have grandmother's fight, you know, so
he went all in.
It got weird.
I remember this one too, because I remember I'm there and one of my guys, I think Aaron Sullivan fought in some tournament. He fought against a guy who ended up committing suicide later from Hammer House. And so
Aaron Sullivan won against Nate Burris and Jeremy Brown that day.
I think he lost against Jeremy Brown, didn't that?
I mean, they listed as a win on Shirt Dog.
Okay, I think they disqualified Jeremy Brown because I think he gets Aaron in something and he's torquing his arm and people like somehow he did something illegal and like Aaron starts tapping, but I think they disqualified the other guy. So this guy gets up and gets like the corner's yelling at him and threw a on him, hit him through the cage. So the pandemonium erupts in the ring. Everybody's going nuts. I'm about to come out, so I'm in the back warming up, and all my people are about to walk out with me. And all of a sudden, I remember Randleman busting the door. You know, and his neck, you know, veins in his neck are coming out. He's freaking out, yelling at everybody because I don't know if he's roided up or what, but he's pissed off. and everybody starts yelling at each other. I'm like,
maybe both.
Yes. And I remember because I'm like, can you guys do this? And I'm walking out to the fight right now. Can you guys get out of my way? Because everybody's like starting to fight. And I remember like Coleman was there, Randleman was there. And I just remember Randleman coming in just house on fire, just pissed off at our whole team. You know, I'm like, I'm going to go fight and I'll be right back. So by the time I got back, they calmer heads had prevailed. It was cool after that. But yeah, Randall come in, just wanting to fight my whole team right before I go get in the cage. It was pretty funny. I was a little intimidating too. And Randleman, you know, on whatever he was on, just comes in with, you know, veins coming out of his neck, trying to fight everybody around. It was pretty funny.
Randleman was not known for his pleasant disposition.
He can get mad pretty quick. 0 to 100. You know?
Yeah, can you imagine trying to just have a level-headed conversation with Kevin Randleman after one of his teammates just lost?
Well, Kevin, here's what happened.
I tried. I had an interview with him, and he said, "I'm going to ask you a question first. Why shouldn't I kill you?" That's literally how we started the interview. I was like, well, I'm a reporter. You know, I don't know.
That's a good random.
Yeah,
I remember Coleman was there too. That's so funny. That Coleman was mad too. It's just like, dude, it was chaos, man. But
the scary part is Mark Coleman is the level-headed.
He's
one.
a level. and the voice of reason was Mark Coleman in the end of the night. You know?
That's frightening.
No, I've met Coleman, and he was crazy. You know, I met him like a few times or whatever, and I was like, "Oh wow, this guy's so crazy." It's like everybody's like, "You should have met Randleman." Like, you should have met
those two together. Ooh, yeah.
Well, the thing is, you know, hats off to Chad because really, that's Mark Coleman and Randleman's show. There's nobody who's going to stop them if they want whatever they want to do. What's going to happen? You know,
you just give your gate money to them. It's over. Go home. It's just over.
I mean, we had team integrated there. We were formidable opponents, but it would have been. It was almost Hammer House versus integrated. You know, but like I said,
you would have made it to your cars. Yeah, you would have made it to your cars. Okay.
Oh, we'd have fought. We'd have fought him, man. Yeah. I mean, we were rolling deep. We probably had 8 guys out of their 4, so it'd have been a fun one. But I was getting ready to fight, so I had to wait till I was done my fight. You know, I had to get paid.
and you tell what kind of fighter you are, where you're like, that would have been fun. Like everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a story, man. But, you know, I actually liked those guys. Like, it was cool with Coleman, but I didn't really know Randleman was. I was like, I better steer clear of him because he just looked like he was just a nut, you know, coming out blonde hair, just especially like I said, the veins coming out. It was like he was looking around us for something to break. I'm like, dude, I'm getting ready to fight. Out of my way, you know. I gotta go right now. They called my name, you know what I mean? It's just like, and he's back there. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy though. He'd be standing there happy and calm, and he's still scary as shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Chris, you had mentioned the fire department. Is that the reason? Is that the reason you had taken an 8-month break?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because like I said, that was my last fight. I was like, man, I already have this scheduled. I'm gonna go ahead and do it, and then I can't really do it after this. Because if I get hurt, I mean, I knew, like I said, this is still my point. Like, this isn't a career. This is a fun thing for me to do. This is not. I was like, man, when you're making, you know, $1,500 here, $2,000 here, you're getting a little bit of money, but I mean, I have kids. It's like, I can't make this my life, you know, and the fire department was something I've been wanting to do for a while. I've been trying for, and I got, you know, I've been hired. I mean, you know how long these processes are. You're doing like a 8-month process to get hired. I've tried out for a couple of them, and I finally got hired. I was actually in recruit class. I'm like, I got to take some time off. I just can't do it until after I'm done with this.
All right. So there's certain footnotes in MMA that don't really get the recognition that they deserve because maybe possibly of where they're from or where they fought at. And your next opponent on December 1st, 2001, in Pancrase again, with gloves, no shin pads, is Kazuo Misaki.
Oh, yeah.
So
he's a bad boy, man. That dude was good.
So let's define what bad boy actually means. He's the 2006 Pride welterweight grand champion. He beat Dan Henderson, and in 2010 he fought Jorge Santiago in what is widely considered the fight of the year in Sengoku. Like this guy, when you look at his record, he's 5-0 at the time. You're listed as 9-6-5, probably more like 19-6-5. He's undefeated, and he's got a win over Dan Henderson. So going into that fight, what were your expectations?
Well, I knew he was with that team Gara or whatever they were. He was part of that. Huh?
Grabaka.
He was part of Team Grabaka, and I remember. So I knew this dude's good, and I've seen him fight a couple of times. Like this guy's big, strong. You know, he's a tough fighter. But I was like, you know, I'm still thinking, you know, I'm as good as any of these guys. So I went out there as a Pancrase, and you know, I knew I had the gloves. This is more in my world, I felt like, in his. So I went out there and just kind of took it to him, man. I mean, it was actually a fight that I actually utilized a little bit of wrestling. I took him down and got on top several times and just kind of. I remember my buddy Alex Stiebling's in the corner, and I'm like doing some. I think it's in a third round, and I knew he's got good jiu-jitsu, so you know, you're in the guard and it's hard to move around too much without getting triangle or whatever. So I'm like doing a couple of body head is hitting him there, and he's like, "What are you, a militant fighter? Get up and pass the guard." He's yelling at me. I'm like, "Dude, you're on my team here. Can you help me out here? Quit trying to yell at me that I'm doing shit wrong. The judges are listening to you." You know what I mean? So, but I just kind of dominated, I think, all 3 rounds and beat him.
Yeah.
He never really had anything on me, I didn't think.
Chris, phenomenal win.
Thank you. I mean, and that guy was, like I said, that dude was really good. I knew it going in, but like I said, I felt like I could beat anybody at any given night, and I just kind of handled him the whole night.
And going back to, so now you're on the fire department. Did you kind of get their permission, or are you kind of concerned I might lose my professional? Like, is that playing into your mental state, or is
no, man? I talked to him, like I said, after I was done with the recruit class, you know, I was allowed to kind of do it. I talked to them about it, and they loved it. You know, I was one of the department that, as long as I got my times taken care of, trays, go right ahead. I know a lot of people concerned, like, well, if you get hurt really bad, you're probably gonna lose your job. And I'm thinking, I mean, maybe, but I mean, I'm not gonna get hurt really bad. Yeah, so I'm not gonna. Yeah, maybe. So I was like, I just won't get hurt real bad. That's how dumb I was. I just thought, I've been fighting for a long time. I've never been hurt really bad besides just shoulder thing. But I mean, I fought 3 months later. So how bad could I have been hurt? You know what I mean? So I'll be all right.
Yeah. I mean, you could get hurt doing anything. You get hurt driving your car or whatever.
And like I said, I always heal really quick. Like I said, separated shoulder. I've seen people be out for 6 months for this one, you know, before they even train again. I fought again in 3 months. So.
Chris, how much of an influence did your time in Japan have on your ground game?
Oh, man, a lot. You know, that's where I really learned. I mean, it was really great when I was there, and I'm going against some of the best guys in the world at the time. You know, in the late 90s, I don't know who was better really than the guys in Pancrase. So, I mean, I guess a lot of that, you could say the jiu-jitsu, Gracie, but it was just a different style. So, but I mean, I remember, you know, we'd start, you know, in like leg lock position, go, and you'd go there for 5 minutes and just go back and forth different positions. And just, I learned how to relax, how to put myself in a bad position and just work your way out, not get submitted. You know, I just learned from repetition, hour after hour, and going with the best guys, some of the best guys in the world, and being put in bad spots and working your way out. And I've always felt like a lot of people don't do that enough. They work on what they're good at, but they get caught in a bad spot. They don't know what to do. Well, we'd start with people taking my back. I'd start with you having the hooks in, and then how do you get out from there? And that's just trial and error and figuring it out, and hour after hour after hour of starting like that. So, you know, I would love it when we do a day like, okay, we're doing 10 rounds, you know, 5 minutes each, and you're going to rotate. And like, I'm rotating with just, you know, guys who've had 30 fights in Pancrase and have been trained there for 5 years. So they were really, really good. You know what I mean? So when you do that for, you know, a couple months, you get pretty good pretty quick. So that's where I really developed my whole, like, knowing what to do in every single situation. And there's no substitute besides time and mat time, what I call it. So my mat time really came then. It was just every day, 6 days a week, you know, twice a day, you were doing something.
Wow.
Well, a lot of wrestlers, it takes them years to ever get comfortable on the bottom, and some never do. Is that where you got comfortable with your bottom game? Is that where you got?
I think I was
comfortable with
always
your bottom
kind of
game?
comfortable right there, but that definitely helped. I mean, I've seen a few wrestlers who like adapt to it really well, and a lot of them always want to be on top. I've had a couple. I had a guy from Purdue Wrestling came in, and he's been training some of us. I haven't seen him in the last few months, so maybe he's stopped now. But I mean, he was really doing very Dylan Lighty, really doing well off his back, and he was just willing to try. I think that was me. I knew right when I first started training. When I talked about like with Jason, those guys, I was probably one of the smallest guys in the gym. A lot of the guys were 250 pounds, and I was 170. I couldn't be on top most of the time. I had to learn to be on bottom and how to work off my back and how to wait patiently for them to do what they were going to do. And then I wasn't going to move them. I had to wait to move myself after they were doing what they were going to do. Because if I'm trying to, well, a big guy, Fergie, he was over 300 pounds. I'm not moving Fergie. I have to wait till he moves a certain way, and then I can move myself or push off him to move myself. So I learned not to waste energy, and I learned that's how I was able to go really, really long amounts of time, because I learned how to not waste energy. And because it's stupid to go out there and waste energy against a big, strong guy, you're not going to win that fight. So you have to use your brain, not necessarily your strength.
Okay. So your next fight is at the IFC 17. Originally, you were slated to fight Jake Shields.
Yeah.
I mean, it was two, submission guys ready to go at it, and Jake Shields breaks his leg. Do you remember who they replaced him with?
Yeah, Nick Diaz.
Yeah, that's right. Nick Diaz.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember
makes
they
his
like
pro debut against,
I think
an almost
like
20
1 or
fight
2
veteran Chris Lytle.
I think it's like 1 or 2-0, but they're like, we got this guy. He won Grappler's Quest, and he's won these other grappling things. I remember thinking, whatever, dude. I've had a bunch of fights. I'm not getting beat by some 19, 20-year-old kid from Grappler Quest or whatever. I don't even know what that is. So, all right. So I remember going in there, and I've talked about this is the worst hotel I've ever stayed at, that Paul Bunyan motel or lodge, whatever. It was like, I remember it was like if you like, Alex was there with me, like in his room, like some of the TV channels would work, and in mine, it was different. Like you never had one TV that would work quite right. And you'd try to open the drawers, and like the drawer would fall off. It was such a shitty place. And it was so hot out there, man. I remember it was in the middle of the desert. Like it was an Indian reservation, but it was like it was like a road back among mountains and rocks. There's nothing there. And I remember, it had to be 100 degrees that day. Now, luckily, by the time I thought it was nighttime, it wasn't 100 degrees, but it was still hot. And I remember, starting off at the beginning, I was like, okay, I feel good. And I went out there. I felt like I did good the first round. I remember I was like, this kid's pretty tough, though, man. I mean, he had an awkward style.
Chris, there was a lot of clinching. And like in your other fights in the past, you wouldn't mind taking the bottom position in order to, like you said, not wasting energy. You refused to do that in this bout. What was the reason behind that?
I think that was just my evolution and kind of learning a little bit. Like some of the fights I lost was because I was on bottom. I lost that Earwood fight. I lost the Monet fight. And I'm like, you know what? Learning a little bit more and getting as far as like the top position is more dominant. I don't want to be on bottom if possible, and that was just, once again, at some point, if you have to be on there because you're going against a bigger guy, like when I was in Japan, there was no weight class. It was a difference. But here it's like, okay, I'm in my weight class. I want to be on top. I want to try and, do what you have to do, I can submit people from the bottom, but I can also do more damage from the top. So I want to be on top if possible.
So second round, you definitely win the first round. It was a hard first round.
Yeah.
Why don't you walk us through the second?
Second round, this dude, I remember he doesn't seem to get tired at all. And I didn't really realize his cardio was so on point there, but he keeps coming. I remember at one point, I'm sweating pretty good. I remember one point I am on bottom, and I go for a heel hook. I flip my leg to it, and I have a really good heel hook locked up on him. I thought I got it, but it kept sliding off because we were sweating. I was thinking, damn it, I think I got this. But I couldn't finish the heel hook. So he gets on top and spins around. And these was still legal to the head there because I remember I set him up. I positioned myself, and I need him in the face from bottom and cut him open.
Yeah.
I remember he's bleeding all over the place. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was hoping they stopped the fight because I was like, he's bleeding good. We gotta stop this fight. So, but he did a good job of holding position, and I think he had me in an armbar at one point, but I slid out of it. He showed some good submission skills, but I showed the ability to get out of his stuff.
So, do you recall any of the chatter during the fight between either yourself and Nick or Nate Diaz from his corner?
No, I don't. What do you remember? What was being said?
Man. Yeah, after you cut him open, he said that it was just a little scratch. That cut wasn't shit. Hey, the cut's fine, it ain't shit. That was Nate Diaz, yelling at Nick, and Nate had the frosted tips going and his hair, and was talking the whole time, man. Like Nate didn't stop.
I remember. So after that, and I remember, like I said, it's hot. And I remember my buddy Alex, he put this cold towel on me after the second round. He's like, I got this. You want me to put it after the first second? I was like, he put it on. I was like, man, I'm hurting, man. He was like, all right, man, you're looking good. Just go out there. You're looking really good on your feet. So keep it up. I was like, all right. So the third round starts, and probably about the first a minute, I'm looking good on my feet. And then I get in, I get a takedown. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to hold him down for a while. And my corner, Alex, starts yelling, stand him up, ref. Right. Stand him up. Stand him up. And I'm just like, stop, no, and so about a minute and a half left in the fight, they stood us up. And I'm done. I have nothing left. And Nick hits me with a 1-2 bump. I cut my eye open. And so I'm like, I can't see. I pull guard. And he ends around on top, throwing punches. So I remember I went to Alex, like, dude, what did you tell him to stand me up for, man? He's like, I thought you were winning on your feet. I was like, thanks. So goes to split decision. I lose the split decision. But it's a close fight, man. I mean, you could have said you could have said I won. You could have said I don't know. It was a tough fight.
He earned it. There was a hard fight.
Yeah.
Definitely, whether he won or lost, man, he had, but on his record, that's his first pro fight. That's his pro debut, whether that's true or not.
I thought he was already had a couple of fights, but I remember after that was when that was, I told you guys before this, that was a fight where I was like, I remember sitting with Alex after that in my hotel room, and I was like, I think I'm done here, man. Because like I said, this wasn't a career; this was for fun. And at that point, that was the worst time at that point. Well, this was not fun. I was like, I'm getting beat by 20-year-old kids who haven't had much experience. Like I fought in UFC, I fought in Japan a lot. I was like, this is very disheartening, man. It hurts my heart to go out there and lose to somebody who's a nobody, is what I said. This dude's nobody. I can't be getting beat by nobodies. I'm not going to do this anymore. This is not fun anymore. And I remember him talking to me about it and just like, man, I get it. And he was like, you know what? This is what he's in pride doing. Where he's like, you know what, Chris? I'm going to be here one day. I know it. I'm going to be right where you are. And I was like, well, I'm here now, so I don't really care. And then I felt good because about a year later, Nick's in the UFC doing well. So I felt better after that. I didn't know he was going to be Nick Diaz, obviously. But, you think he just got beat by somebody who's a nobody, it hurt me bad, man. And that sucked.
So what were weigh-ins like?
There wasn't any talk, man. There was no
really?
talk going. No, not that I remember, man. He wasn't talking trash at all.
I'm disappointed in that.
Yeah, but he was pretty new at that, and so I remember I talked to him a little bit afterwards, and he was all right. And I remember I talked to Nate. Nate was just a young kid. There's probably 15, and he hung out with us for a long time and talked to us. But I wasn't much in the mood. But he hung out in our room for a little bit and just talking about how good of a fight it was and all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, man, whatever, thanks. And I wasn't really in the mood, but I was cool to him. And then he's liked me ever since. So he is.
Yeah, those guys really only seem to get nuts when they feel like they've been disrespected. I mean, because they've only had a handful of those.
True.
When they do have those those interactions, they're legendary and you remember them forever. Yeah. But it's really only a few people really brought that out of them.
There are no punks, man. Like if you do anything they consider disrespectful, it's on. You know what I mean? Wow. They're not gonna take that stuff.
Chris, that's like a finish line that tends to move. Like, for instance, we just had Joe Dorkson on, or not Joe Dorkson, Joe Riggs.
Joe Riggs.
And Joe Riggs, Joe's like trying to be, he's a hothead too. Just in passing, Joe says, hey man, good luck or whatever. And Nick goes, are you going to make weight this time? Because he missed by 0.5 pounds for championship weight for a title fight.
Yeah.
So he came in at 170 and a half, which is making weight under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
And after that, like the relationship just exploded, and Joe went on to document 5 other additional times of where they fist fought on site just because of that one interaction. And it's just like, the disrespect could just be like, well, he winked at me wrong. You know what I mean? Like, when you're just, hey, what's up, dude?
I like Nick was like, gave him a dirty look, I guess. He came over to my side of the hospital. He knows I'm crazy. He knows I'll come after him. That's on him. I was like, that's interesting logic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It seems like you really can't understand where, well, our families have fought for 300 years. It's like, it doesn't really compute. And then you talk to the Diaz and you're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I can see how situations like that can arise.
But like I said, if they think you're a legit fighter and you come out and you're a grinder, you're hard nosed, they like you, man. I mean, if you're one of them, they think you're one of them. You're one of them. It is what it is. But if you're not one of them, they don't like you.
Yeah. So Chris, you take some time off. Obviously, you had to do some soul searching after that took place, and you fly back to Japan, and you're the co-main event against Yuji Hoshino.
Mike, you're like 5 for 5, dude.
Man, big out, dude. Thank you, bro. I was going to interrupt Chris in mid-answer just to kind of give myself props again. I appreciate you acknowledging that.
Yeah.
So Yuji Hoshino, the thing about him was it's gloves, no shin pads.
Oh.
He's got a win over Carlos Carvalho, who fought in the UFC, Canadian guy, super tough. Brian Garrity, in our interview with him, just couldn't believe just how good he was. And he also went 3 rounds with Nate Marquardt before he got triangled. Now, Chris, do you remember this? It seems like you're kind of hesitating. I'm going to bring you through
I didn't at first, but I think this is the fight. The closest I've ever been to being knocked out in a fight was by this guy.
It ended in the first round. You won by
Never mind.
Yes, you won by triangle. And like there's instances in fighters' careers, like when we interviewed Chael Sonnen, we didn't get to it during the interview, but I said that Trevor Prangley, that second fight, there's an instance in that where he levels up. And this is your fight, in my opinion. You're super aggressive. You went out there for the kill. And this is a very well-rounded opponent and Pancrase. And once again, you started the fight with a low blow. And at this point, you kind of knew what that
I'm
means.
in trouble.
You're in trouble.
Yep.
And you went out and you finished him. Like, I've never seen you this aggressive in a fight ever.
Yeah, I do admit this is a different fight than I was saying. But as soon as that happened, I was like, here we go again. Because I'll be honest, I had a chip on my shoulder when I'd go to Japan at that point. Because I was like, I'd lost enough really close decisions and a couple fights I thought I won that they didn't give me. So I was like, I'm not letting this happen again. And that was the first time I think where I had started giving this I don't care attitude. I was like, man, I've had this happen twice, and that was the first time where I was like, I feel like I'm good enough and I'm skilled enough where if I just go out there and let it all hang out, I'm going to win most of my fights. So trying to be reserved and outpoint somebody, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, man. I just got to go out and fight because, that Nick Diaz fight, at the end I tried to hold him down because I'm tired. Didn't work out for me. I was like, whatever. I'm just going to come out and try and take people out the whole time. And that was the first time in my career where I felt that's where I kind of really started trying to fight like that.
You know what's kind of disturbing about this fight? And I mean, this is so far off topic, but like I had to rewind it just to make sure like I saw what it is I think I saw. The cup check by the referee. Oh my God, dude. Oh, Chris, you might have a lawsuit on your hands.
What if I'm not wearing a cup? What if I'm not wearing?
On his knees, both hands. Oh, Chris. Chris, you're a
It was
victim.
odd. Hey, man, what are you going to do?
Not your fault.
Like, is this
It's
what?
not your
Is this?
fault.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
It's not your fault. You're a victim,
Hashtag me
Chris.
too. Yeah.
So from there, October to December, you fight in Pancrase Spirit 9. Oh, hook and shoot veteran Miguel Durante. Izuru Takeuchi.
This is a guy. I think this was the closest I've ever been to being knocked out.
Wait. Excuse me, Chris. Miguel. I said Izuru Takeuchi.
Yeah, you're 6 for 6, Mike. You know,
Killing it.
you
Sorry,
have
Chris.
to.
Go ahead.
Now,
Go ahead with
now
your
we're
answers.
now
It's
we're
about
gonna
you, not me.
now we're going to expect you to string together a couple of shows now, but
Exactly.
But here, Takeuchi had on the fight card previous had just beaten Nate Marquardt just for a framework.
Well, I remember thinking this guy's a wrestler. You know, this guy's gonna try and get me down, whatever. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna go out there. And what year is this in?
It's 2002, December 21st.
So I've been doing some pro boxing. So I'm like, all right. And so I'm gonna go out there.
And you got Keith Palmer in your corner.
Keith Palmer in corner. So this guy's stand-up's rotten. I'm gonna take this guy out right away. I'm coming with the big right hand. So I go out there. He's a wrestler. I'm like, I know what he's gonna try and do. He's gonna try to take me down. So I go out there and try and throw this big overhand right. And as soon as I do that, immediately all of a sudden I see us. I'm on the ground. And I'm like, what happened? You know, and this guy is on top of me trying to hit me. So I'm like, oh Jesus. So then I start grabbing, trying to recover. And I hold him in tight, and then I eventually get on top at the end of that round and keep trying to fight. And I remember I go over to the corner afterwards. I'm like, Keith, did he hit me with a uppercut? What happened? He's like, dude, jumping knee. So it was like a Ben Askren type of without the run. Like he just went out there, and as soon as I threw the right hand, he threw a jumping knee, landed right in my face. I didn't even see it. Like I never saw it. I still haven't seen it. Haven't seen the tape. All I knew was I threw a big right hand, and I'm on the ground. Like it was like, it flashed me. He knocked me out, really, and the ground woke me up because I was like, how did I get on the ground? You throw a right
Chris,
hand.
I think you're confusing. That may have been Koji Oishi.
Okay. Who is
All
this?
right. So here's the thing when you got a 55 veteran like Chris Lytle. They have
These Japanese names mean nothing to me. I don't know.
Okay, right. Dude, and Chris, I'm pointing out when I barely pronounce them properly. And you know what? Some would even argue I'm probably been wrong every single name that's come out of my mouth. So that's the next Japan fight after this. And that's the last time you fought in Japan, where Phyllis Lee was also in your corner. But I'm going to kind of take you back to kind of spur some memories on this. In the first round, you were super dominant and you had his back for like 4 minutes. But you were going for a rear naked choke for like about 90 seconds, but it was only like one arm in, and your other arm was completely extended, and he's pulling on it. And I don't know if you burned your arms out because you hit a wall.
That's exactly what happened. I remember this guy. He was a Japanese veteran guy, and I got his back. I got behind him. I suplexed him, and a good suplex. I take his back, and I got the one hook in, and I'm trying to finish the choke, and he just pulled this arm and held it like there. So I'm trying, because I got the one hook. I got two hooks, and I got my right arm choking him. And I knew if I could just get this up behind his head, the fight's over. But he did you could just tell that, he'd had a lot of experience, because all he did was remain totally calm. He sat there and put two hands on my one arm and just held it. Just didn't even try and move. So I was squeezing with all my might.
Your other arm is like right around his neck. And like, it appears you can do a one-armed rear naked choke because of how deep it is.
It was very deep, but the guy was so relaxed, and he turned his head just enough to get his elbow or his chin right where my elbow was. So I couldn't quite, there was a little pocket of air, and that's why I kept trying to adjust, because if you could get in the right spot, I could have got it with one arm. But he was very skilled and defensive. He knew he just held my left arm and put his chin in that crook every time. So I'm wasting all my arm strength for about it was longer than 90 seconds, man. I felt like it was about half the round, at least I was in that position.
Yeah, it was wild, man.
I couldn't finish him.
And let's also take into effect, he's also the former king of Pancrase. So this guy is in terms of like skill level at this time, this is probably one of the higher end skilled guys you have fought in your career at this point, including, Nick Diaz.
Yeah, this guy was very, very, like, I would say on the ground, man. He was very ground savvy. Like I said, I could just tell from the amount of time I had him in a horrible position, and he didn't panic at all, and he just stayed relaxed. And that's another time when I learned you only really have to go all out when you know you got it. And I was trying to make it to where I had him, and I was close to getting him a couple of times, but I couldn't quite get it. And so I totally gassed my arms out in that first round.
So he gets top position. Takeuchi gets top position in the second round. You couldn't get him off of you. Yeah. And in the third round, you dominated the stand-up portion. The rest of the round is spent on your back trying to switch positions. And, in the past, not this fight, there's several instances where you'd be in the corner with the guy, and I should have mentioned this in the first, fight that we broke down. You'd have top position, but it'd be in the corner, but it'd be like a real weird type spot, and you'd be pepper and hammer and, nothing heavy. They would say, break, and then they would stand you guys both up. In instances like this, you guys would go underneath the ring rope, and they'd be pounding you, and they go, break, position you, pointing towards center, where the other guy would just kind of move you over back underneath the rope again so we can continue stealing time. It was more of like a time stealing exercise than it was like a thorough ass kicking.
Yeah, I never felt like when I was there, I never left with like a bunch of black guys and I was getting beat up. It was more just a countdown for the time to be over. So like I said, but then it was just about winning the fight at all costs, not necessarily, dominating the fight, and if he's holding position, he's winning it. That's all they cared about.
Yes. Yeah. So you go to Japan, receive another, bad result.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you come back and you're taking time off in between fights at this time because your next bout's against Aaron Riley. And we've only got 2 more fights.
The reason I'm taking time off in between is I'm doing pro boxing at the time. Okay. So if you look at my pro boxing record, I had 15 fights in this, 15 pro boxing fights in about a 3-year period too.
So you're filling that time gap.
Yeah.
With something
and like
else.
I said, I remember one time I had a pro boxing match, and then I fight, Derek Noble, and then I have another pro boxing match. And those all happened probably within a month. Wow. Maybe 5 weeks.
So they bring you back to fight for the Indiana state title against Aaron Riley, which is something that we had talked about in the past. And I had not been able to track the fight down until recently. And Aaron Riley, I'm not going to say you came in as an opponent, Chris, but you didn't have the fireworks display as well as the gladiator with the sword and helmet and shield.
Yeah, I was already in the ring for that.
Provided by, I'm sure, the promotion, like Aaron did. And you got to announce first tonight.
I'm going to say that was more of a Jeff Osborne type of guy thing, but whatever.
We got Miguel here. I mean, this is your opportunity to. I mean, if you're
no,
on Miguel,
no.
We got the green light.
In the divorce, I think Miguel got me.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't walk through what was it, Toys R Us, looking for like gladiator swords and crap. It's like that's not my style.
Yeah. So I'm in the ring and I see all this going on. There's a big smoke display and there's a gladiator stand. I was like, what the hell's going on? I'm still fighting, right? What's going on? So, but I get it, man. Pageantry, and he was a hometown guy. And I remember, somebody told me, they're like, man, I just heard who was in his corner?
Matt Hume.
Matt Hume.
Matt Hume's like, hey, make sure you keep it on your feet against this guy. And I was like, cool. So I remember that's what they told us, like, go try to keep it on his feet. But I was like, cool. That's what I want to hear, because I don't think people, like I said, the people before that, especially in Hookah probably thought I was more of a ground guy. And then this is right around the time when people after this fight, they started thinking I'm a pure stand-up guy. They thought I was a pro boxer. All right, because, I remember I went out there and I'm
super
fighting with the guy.
Super aggressive.
Yeah, because I knew he was going to be there to be hit. I seen him fight. I know the dude could take a punch, but I remember I hit him with the good left hand, a good left hook, pop, and I was like, that hurt him. So I just knew at that point, my left hand's really good, but I remember my right hand's my knockout punch. I knew as soon as I hit him with that good right, and a lot of times you hit a guy with a good punch, you kind of got him hurt, but it's really hard to hit that second punch, the knockout punch. But I was able to land it, and I knew as soon as I landed that good right hand, he was done. You know what I mean? And I knocked him down, and I went to hit him again, and the referee jumped on me. And I was super excited because, I mean, he came off that legendary fight against Robbie Lawler. He had a couple legendary fights in the UFC.
Steve Berger.
Yep. People weren't able to finish him, and go in there and get that first round knockout was huge for me.
Yeah.
I was actively at this point, I was actively trying to get in UFC because the UFC Zuffa had bought him. And I remember as soon as I told you how I wasn't really happy about the UFC when I fought for him. And I remember like 2 fights afterwards, Zuffa bought him, and my friends told me, "Hey man, have you watched UFC lately?" Like new owners, they putting some money in it. This thing's different now. And I started watching it, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm interested again. And then I saw, fights like Robbie Lawler versus Aaron Rodgers. I was like, I definitely want to be part of this. I got to get back in here, but then you can't just call and they say, okay. You know what I mean? So I was trying to get in, but it was just tough.
Well, Aaron, I mean, not only did you stop him, and he's known for his chin. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's got his jaw broken on 3 different occasions, and the fight got stopped in between rounds by the doctor after going a good full round and a half with that broken jaw. So you made an incredible statement, and the way you did it too, you folded him underneath the ropes. Like there was no question in regards to the stoppage. And Miguel, I think this is the time where you talk about the extracurricular activities that took place between the families that Chris doesn't like talking about.
Well, I think we got it broken down to that Aaron came in with his girlfriend from Washington because he was living out in Washington there, and she did some kickboxing. And I don't know if it's Chris's girlfriend or Chris's sister, but they got into it too. And I think we got about a minute out of that before that got broken up. So,
Hey, all I know is there was about, whoever was in Evansville, what do you have? 800 people there, and I had about 4.
Yeah.
And my 4 were the only people cheering at the end of this. You know what I
So
mean?
Chris,
nobody wanted me to win besides my cornermen and my 4 people. And with them yelling, I think that caused some problems. And that's when the extracurricular activity started.
So in essence, Aaron Riley is Jeff Osborne's guy. When Chris had mentioned that when the divorce happened, Miguel inherits Chris, obviously. I mean, we're doing this. And
I paid for that damn clavicle fix, so goddamn it, I deserve it.
Thanks, Dad. And the Lytles, it's safe to say you guys went 2-0 that night. Is that correct?
No, I mean, it wasn't. I think it was my sister-in-law, actually, because she's got a bit of a mouth on her. And I don't even know what happened there, man. I was too happy. I was doing my thing in the ring, jumping around and, celebrating. And I don't know what happened out there. Besides, all I saw at the end was them kind of getting escorted out. I was like, all right, I guess I'll leave.
I think that one officially goes down as a no contest.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, well, this brings us to our last fight, Chris. You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Your next trip is out to Pancrase, and this closes out your tenure in Japan. And you fight Koji Oishi, and gloves, no shin pads at this time as well. They've kind of adapted into the American skill set in regards to rules, and you drop a split decision against him.
Like I said, I wish no shin pads. I wish I'd had knee pads. Like I said, I get hit with that knee right away. Closest I think I've ever been to being knocked out in an MMA fight, because I like throwing a right hand to being on the ground. You're like, what happened? But I mean, I get up and like, oh shit, he's on top of me. And I can hear Fellowship going, get him, Keith, help him.
Yeah.
Keith's like, what do you mean to do? What can I do? And I'm like, man.
Chris, you could hear it. You could hear it on the audio. You got to turn it up really loud. And his manager, Phyllis Lee, is saying that he's killing him, Keith, to your corner,
Save
man.
him, Keith. Like,
Save him. Because
he hit me with that like a jumping knee, and I'm just happy I didn't get knocked out. This showed me that I can take, because like I never even saw it. I had a look on there. I didn't even.
Okay, so what takes place is you can kind of gauge, because the rule set's constantly evolving over in Japan, particularly in Pancrase. He's got wrestling shoes on. So they used to allow kicks to the head with wrestling shoes, but open hand palm strikes to the face. So now with gloves, and they've kind of changed it around, there's no kicks to the head. So you have to assume, just based on that, there's not going to be much, leg movement in terms of kicks. Yeah. And he runs out and throws a flying knee. And at the very last second, you see it and you kind of go with the same direction rather than into it. And I think that's what saved you from getting highlight reel knockout. Yeah.
Well, I never saw it, to be honest with you. So I don't know if that's just what happened. I went to throw right hand. Maybe I backed up for the right hand. But, I went to throw right hand. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground. I'm like, where the hell? And then he jumps on, starts hitting me. So I pull him in, and I end up getting on top. It was kind of, after that, I was still a little dazed after probably the whole fight. But I felt like it was a little back and forth action. I'm sure he won the first round because.
No, you won the first round.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Other than that opening exchange. All right. So I'm looking at it, and this is another one of those times where you're actually in the corner. You're peppering him. You could ride the entire round out here. He can't move anywhere. You've just got him like in this strange position, and the ropes are not interfering at all. It's just he's stuck. And you're peppering, and you're on top for about 2.5 minutes. And the referee goes, break, and they stand you guys up again rather than allow you guys to continue. Believe it or not, I think you won that first round because he didn't do anything other. The minute it hit the ground, your internal instincts were there and allowed you to gain top position.
Okay. I couldn't remember.
I want you to consider the possibility too that Phyllis Lee, as Mike pointed out, the manager there, a little rough around the edges. She may have been trying to distract the referee for Keith to hand you brass knuckles because that's how they did it in the old days,
I would have taken him. I would have taken that point, but So, I remember, like I said, I've lost 5 split decisions in my career, and I had a lot of draws and a couple of majority decisions. A lot of them were over in Japan. So, that part didn't do my career any help. It was a tough time over there. A lot of learning went on, but
it made you a better fighter. I think we can both agree.
100%. And I've been through it. I think it made for a different level of mental toughness. And I think it just got me ready for when I did go to the UFC. I was just different than most of the guys there, so it was just a little bit.
Let's keep in mind also Oishi is 1-1 against the Diaz brothers. So he is no joke. You're in that co-main event status once again. And on that second and third round, like I had described before, what took place earlier in your career, he kept positioning you outside of the ring, stealing more time. And it didn't look like there was a big size difference between you two, but there was an advantage in terms of wrestling, and it was on Oishi's side. He kept using top position he stole time. He didn't beat you up. He stole time.
Yeah, like I said, I never felt like when I go over there, I'd leave beat up or anything. And it was just more frustrating that they were, just trying to eke out their decision. It definitely made me think of, how I did not want to fight. I wanted to be the opposite. And that's kind of eventually how my career turned out, as being known for a guy who doesn't want to fight like that. And that had a lot to do with it. When that happens, I don't only feel like I didn't. It's just a frustrating feeling the whole time, and I didn't want to be that kind of a guy. To me, like I said, this wasn't. There's more to it than just trying to go out there and eke out a win. I never liked that, and I never wanted to be like that.
So, and that winds up the Chris Lytle Pancrase years. Miguel, I'm done.
I think that's our 50th podcast, our 50th interview. And I think that, we're starting to get a following. A lot of people are looking at it, but this is your chance to really meet the pilot here of this project, and that's Chris Lytle. You know, he's been asking the interviews and showing you flashes and stuff, but here I think you really get to know the man, and I think he's right. At this point in his career, a lot of experience, and it just battle tested him for a real run in the UFC. The UFC had stepped up their game. To go back, Chris was going to have to, and right here, we're about to leave him off as Chris Lytle is a world-class athlete. Thank you, Chris.
Well, I want to thank you guys for geez, you guys do so much work for this and make this happen. It's awesome. Mike, your interviews are, unbelievable. Miguel, the back stuff you're doing. Thank you. But anybody watching, man, I love this. And if you guys have any questions about anything, man, just hit me up or hit Mike up, Miguel. Make sure I want to get these stories out here. If we don't keep doing this stuff, these stories are going to die. People are not going to know any of these very interesting stories from the old school days. And I love a lot of the guys we get on here. We're getting some gems, and you guys got to listen to them and keep them going. So like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff for me.
Yeah, a lot of times there is a record of this stuff. There's who showed up and what they weighed and who won. But a lot of times that's not even accurate, and it leaves you with more questions than answers. So this is just phenomenal. I love what you guys do. Thanks for being so consistent with it. I mean,
and Jonah, for those listeners at home, and I was going to put this, anytime that I need something here within the Chicagoland area, this guy on his own time, on his own dime, clears his schedule and makes way for us. We got a Shonie Carter interview coming up. We knew there'd be some kind of difficulties with it. Jonah did everything on his own in order to help make sure that took place. So, Jonah, a world of thank you to you as well, man.
Yeah, now he's one of us, man. Jonah, thanks for everything. Thanks for joining us so we could grill Chris. I think we got a lot of good info there. We're going on nearly 3 hours, so I'm going to...
With guys that very few people have information on here in the United States, too, I might add. Fantastic. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. And congratulations on 50.
Well, Mike, just got done. I see we just got done with the deep dive with Chris Lytle, and hey, Chris is a star for a reason, man.
Well, he came prepared, man. When we do our little roadmaps and our preparation, on this one we didn't include Chris. I sent him a couple pictures of what I was looking at, and he was flipping out. So that was the only preparation that we had with Chris. You and I kind of handled everything because we kind of like that. I know it might sound cheesy, but the element of surprise, because it's the emotion we're getting is real and raw.
Yeah, I think it's going to come across. You're going to see it in the interview. Once again, this is an interview that if you can get out to the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, comment, and stuff. It does have a visual aspect thanks to JHU Media and the work Mike has put in with networking and things. There's some things that you can see there and footage that you can actually see about what we're talking about. So that's a plus. That's something special for the 50th podcast. And, I think from there, if you're downloading it on iTunes or any of the podcasts, you're not going to see, it may be worth your time later visiting us on YouTube as well. But still, almost 3 hours with Chris Lytle talking about basically a lost area of the fight history, and that's Japan and the Pancrase years in the 90s. So thank you, Chris, as usual, and we'll see you for the next interview.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.